Yu Yu Hakusho opens in a quiet, everyday city when everything suddenly changes. A 14-year-old boy named Yusuke Urameshi runs out into the street and is struck by a car, dying instantly. He wakes up as a ghost and sees his own unconscious body lying there. Still not fully understanding that he's dead, Yusuke tries to talk to the medical staff as they take his body away, but no one can hear him. Frustrated and upset, he tries to piece together everything that happened earlier that day. In the flashback, the day began a little differently. The first thing Yusuke remembers is being at Shiraishi Junior High. He recalls making a comment about Keiko's skirt, the class representative. Keiko scolds him for not wearing the proper school uniform and for ruining the class's attendance record, but Yusuke doesn't take her seriously and instead acts like a pervert, which earns him a slap across the face. After Keiko leaves, two classmates approach her and ask how she can even talk to Yusuke, since he's known as Shiraishi Junior High's #1 delinquent. Keiko responds by saying that Yusuke has his problems, but deep down, he's actually kind-hearted. The next thing Yusuke remembers is confronting two students who were using his name after stealing another student's wallet. Before anything could be resolved, a teacher named Iwamoto shows up and immediately accuses Yusuke of being the one who tried to steal the wallet. Fed up, Yusuke decides to leave school again, but he's stopped by Principal Takanaka, who tries to bring him back. Yusuke manages to break free though and heads home anyway. When he gets home, he's met with what he describes as a lecture from his young mother. She tells him that if he hates being preached to so much, that he should just live on his own, which only adds to his irritation that day. He storms off and is soon confronted by Kazuma Kuwabara and his gang. Kuwabara is Yusuke's longtime rival, but no matter how hard he tries, he can never beat Yusuke in a fight. Once again, Yusuke easily defeats him, pushing Kuwabara's record to 0 wins and 156 losses. After that, Yusuke continues wandering around until he comes across a young kid playing soccer. He warns the kid that playing in the street is dangerous because cars could easily hit him. The kid is a little frightened by how serious Yusuke sounds, so Yusuke lightens the mood by making silly faces to cheer him up. Before leaving, he warns the kid one more time not to play in the street. Despite this, the kid keeps playing and eventually kicks the ball into the road. He runs after it, not realizing that a car driven by a careless driver is coming straight toward him. In that moment, Yusuke rushes in to save the kid, giving up his own life in the process. This brings the flashback to an end. Once Yusuke fully realizes that he really did die, he meets Botan, a strange woman dressed in pink who introduces herself as the Grim Reaper. Yusuke has a hard time believing her at first. Concerned about the kid he saved, he asks Botan about his condition and the two go to the hospital to check on him. After seeing the kid is safe, Yusuke tells Botan that he has no regrets and that she can take him to hell or wherever he's supposed to go. Botan, however, explains that she's not there to take him away and instead offers him an ordeal that could allow him to come back to life. Confused, Yusuke listens as Botan explains that the spirit world wasn't expecting him to die that day. What he did was completely out of character for someone with his reputation, and because of that, they hadn't prepared a place for him yet. Angered by this, Yusuke asks if they were expecting the kid to die instead. Botan responds by saying that the kid would have survived regardless, meaning Yusuke technically died for nothing. Yusuke is stunned by this, but Botan reminds him that he's being offered a second chance at life. Surprisingly, Yusuke turns it down, convinced that everyone will be happier now that he's gone. Botan, though, suggests that he attend his own wake before making a final decision. That night, Yusuke arrives at his wake and sees his classmates gathered together. When he notices some of them laughing, he assumes they're only there to earn extra credit. However, his attention is quickly drawn to Keiko, who is openly crying over his death. Soon after, he notices Kuwabara, who is mourning even harder than Keiko. Kuwabara's friends struggle to hold him back as he screams in grief, shouting that Yusuke was supposed to be there for him before he's eventually dragged away. Yusuke then spots Iwamoto and another teacher at the wake, both of whom seem almost happy he's dead. Principal Takanaka steps in to confront them and defend Yusuke before entering the house to pay his respects. Yusuke follows him inside and is surprised to see the principal genuinely mourning his death. He also sees his mother doing the same. The kid he saved is there as well, along with his mother, and as they leave, the kid tells her that Yusuke was actually a really nice guy, even though so many people there seem to hate him or not care about him at all. The kid, in his innocent way, doesn't realize that Yusuke died for his sake. After witnessing all of this and seeing the people who truly cared about him, Yusuke finally accepts the ordeal and follows Botan to the spirit world. Botan brings Yusuke to the spirit world, the realm that exists outside the world of the living, so he can meet its ruler, the great King Enma. As they travel through the spirit world, Yusuke is caught off guard by what he sees. Ogres rushing around like employees at a stock exchange, constantly busy processing paperwork for the dead. On top of that, he's nervous about meeting King Enma, expecting him to be some kind of terrifying, intimidating figure. Instead, when he and Botan finally arrive, they're greeted by what looks like a toddler wearing a uniform. Yusuke laughs at the sight, assuming the child must be a joke or a mistake, but the toddler introduces himself as the mighty Koenma. He explains that he's actually the son of the great King Enma and warns Yusuke to watch how he speaks, adding that despite his appearance, he's been around for a very long time. Koenma then gives Yusuke the key to his revival, a small golden egg that will eventually hatch into a spirit beast. He explains that Yusuke must keep the egg with him at all times because the creature inside feeds on the energy of a person's soul. If Yusuke's soul turns out to be evil in nature, the spirit beast will devour him when it hatches, body and soul, causing him to completely cease to exist in any realm. However, if Yusuke's soul is good, the spirit beast that emerges will guide him back to his living body. Feeling confident that he can handle the ordeal, Yusuke returns to the living world with Botan to make sure his body is being properly looked after. Until the trial is complete, his body will retain a faint pulse. Even so, Yusuke needs to get the attention of at least one of his friends to prevent his body from being cremated. One of the best ways to reach someone, Botan explains, is to stand by their bedside, since humans are more sensitive to the supernatural while they're asleep. Yusuke quickly rules out his mother, Atsuko, because she's completely drunk, numbing her grief over losing her son. Keiko becomes the next best option, so he goes to her room and is surprised to see that she's still crying over his death, even in her sleep. Yusuke speaks to her in her dream, explains what's going on, and tells her not to cry anymore. She wakes up suddenly afterward. The next day, Keiko goes to Yusuke's house to tell Atsuko about the dream, only for Atsuko to reveal that she also had a strange dream about Yusuke. Not wanting to take away any comfort from a grieving mother, Keiko chooses not to share Yusuke's warning with her. With that plan failing, Yusuke realizes he only has one option left: possessing the body of someone he knows, someone who already has an unusual awareness of the supernatural, so he can warn them not to cremate his body. After thinking it through, his rival Kuwabara seems like the best choice, since he's been sensitive to the supernatural since childhood. Botan warns him, however, that possession in this case comes with a strict 1-hour time limit. If he wastes that time or messes things up, he likely won't get another chance to communicate with anyone. Yusuke successfully takes over Kuwabara's body and immediately rushes off to find Keiko. He first stops by her parents' restaurant and tries to explain who he really is, but her parents see this as disrespectful behavior and kick him out. Things only get more complicated as Yusuke keeps running into rival gangs who want to fight Kuwabara. He ends up taking them all on by himself and winning, but by the time he finally finds Keiko, he has only 10 minutes left. Struggling to figure out how to convince her that it's really him, Yusuke tries to think of something he could do that only he would ever do to her. Something that would immediately prove his identity after knowing each other for so long. That's when he comes up with an idea. While walking, Yusuke suddenly runs up behind Keiko and grabs her breasts. Shocked and furious at being touched, Keiko slaps him across the face and yells out Yusuke's name, but then realizes that the person in front of her isn't actually him. She quickly understands that it's Yusuke inside Kuwabara's body. Yusuke tells her that he has a chance to come back to life, but only if she makes sure his body is taken care of and that nothing happens to it. He also asks her to tell his mother to stop the funeral. Keiko believes him despite him being in someone else's body because she knows him better than anyone. Soon after, Yusuke's time runs out and Kuwabara is left confused with no idea what just happened. Keiko immediately runs to Atsuko to tell her that Yusuke's body needs to be protected, but Atsuko reveals that his heart has already started beating again, showing signs of life. Overwhelmed with relief, the two embrace each other as Yusuke and Botan watch from the sky. Yusuke then notices that the golden egg Koenma gave him has begun to glow. He stares at it, wondering what lies ahead as it feeds on the choices he made today. While they discuss the golden egg, Yusuke and Botan witness Keiko being attacked by a group of thugs from a rival junior high. Just in time, Kuwabara and his 3 friends rush in and jump into the situation, which quickly turns into a full-on brawl with the other gang. The next day, everyone involved ends up back at school, sitting in the principal's office, being reprimanded for starting the fight. One of the teachers present is Mr. Akashi, a man with rat-like teeth and an equally unpleasant attitude. He has a deep hatred for Kuwabara and his friends, and is more than willing to make their lives miserable. As punishment, Akashi declares that if even one of them gets into another fight over the next week, Kuwabara's friend Okubo will lose his job. This hits especially hard for Okubo, who works through the school to help support his struggling family. Reluctantly, everyone agrees to the terms. Later that day after school, Akashi is seen talking with his accomplice, Iwamoto, another teacher who dislikes Yusuke, Kuwabara, and the rest of the group. The two discuss a trap Akashi has secretly set for Kuwabara in hopes of getting him expelled. Akashi also mentions how the school's reputation will improve once Yusuke, Kuwabara, and their entire group are removed. The trap involves setting Kuwabara up to run into the same rival thugs from the day before. Akashi hopes that Kuwabara will be forced into a fight, giving him the excuse he needs to expel all 4 boys he dislikes. Despite the setup, Kuwabara sticks to the promise he made to his friends. Instead of fighting back, he endures a brutal beating from the 3 merciless thugs without retaliating. This only makes Akashi angrier, so the next day, he raises the stakes even higher. Akashi announces that a science exam will be given in 6 days, and if even one of them scores below 50%, Okubo's work license will be revoked. Okubo tries to stay optimistic, pointing out that he scored a 39 on the last test and believes that if he studies harder, he can pass. Kuwabara, on the other hand, had scored a shocking 7 on the previous exam. At the same time, Yusuke makes fun of Kuwabara, casually telling Botan that he scored a 12, much to her disappointment. Still, Kuwabara stands by his promise and vows to score above a 50 on the upcoming test. Kuwabara puts in serious effort to study, but things nearly fall apart when he gets cornered in a public library by another group of school thugs. Once again, he's beaten badly, but despite the physical punishment, his resolve doesn't break. He reassures his friends to keep studying no matter what, though later that night, exhaustion catches up to him as he falls asleep at his desk. So, Yusuke enters his dream and motivates him to keep pushing forward and study harder. The next day arrives, the day of the exam, and once again, 3 thugs tail Kuwabara, trying one last time to provoke him into a fight. As they move in, they accidentally knock down a girl, causing her to faint. This becomes Yusuke's opportunity. He possesses the girl's body and uses his street fighting skills to defeat the thugs, stopping the situation before Kuwabara ever has to get involved. Kuwabara then takes the test, receiving subtle assistance from Yusuke, and manages to answer enough questions correctly to pass. This frustrates Akashi yet again, but Iwamoto quietly steps in and erases Kuwabara's answer to the final question, lowering the score. What they don't realize is that Principal Takanaka is nearby and overhears everything. When Kuwabara gets his test back, he's confused. He was confident he scored over 50, especially since he copied his answers onto scratch paper to double check them later. Looking more closely, he notices the erasure mark on the final question and immediately realizes that his score was sabotaged. Furious, Kuwabara lunges forward, ready to knock Akashi out, but Yusuke somehow manages to stop him just in time. Principal Takanaka then steps in, catching Akashi just as he's about to leave. One of the few adults who genuinely respected both Yusuke and Kuwabara, Takanaka confronts Akashi and tells him to fix the score he sabotaged. Kuwabara and his friends are allowed to remain at the school, and Okubo is able to keep his part-time job. Later on, Yusuke questions how he was able to reach Kuwabara the way he did. Botan explains that what happened was Yusuke unknowingly transmitting his emotions to Kuwabara, something only extremely close friends are capable of experiencing. As the day comes to an end, Kuwabara quietly realizes that Yusuke was behind everything that helped him succeed. From a distance, he silently thanks his fallen friend. Later, from the spirit world, Koenma sends an investigator named Sayaka to check in on how Yusuke is doing. When Yusuke asks her what exactly she's investigating, she tells him it's a secret. She then casually asks Botan about Yusuke's girlfriend, which Yusuke immediately denies, saying he doesn't have a girlfriend at all. Sayaka clarifies what she means and asks which girl is Keiko, but Yusuke insists that Keiko is just a friend. Botan points Keiko out below them, and Sayaka comments on how strange it is that a girl like Keiko would actually be interested in someone like Yusuke. Since the nature of their relationship doesn't seem very clear to her, Sayaka decides that Keiko will be the focus of her investigation. After spending time observing Keiko at school, watching her in class, during sports, and while she's interacting with friends, Sayaka concludes that the attraction between Yusuke and Keiko must be one-sided. However, back at school, Keiko turns down the advances of a handsome boy who asks her to be his girlfriend, explaining that she already likes someone else. Botan then teases Yusuke about this, pointing out how lucky he was that Keiko chose him over a clearly handsome guy. Later on, Keiko goes to visit Yusuke's house, which is now covered in trash thanks to his mother returning to her irresponsible habits. As Keiko approaches Yusuke's body, she slips on a bottle, causing a pile of garbage to fall over his face. She rushes into his room, clears the trash away, and gently wipes his face clean. As she looks at him, she becomes overwhelmed with emotion. Keiko leans in, and just as she's about to kiss Yusuke, much to his shock as he watches from above as a ghost, an alarm echoes through the city. The announcement warns everyone about a pyromaniac who's been setting fires around town. The sound snaps Keiko out of the moment, and she leaves the house after remembering that her mother wanted her to go grocery shopping after school. Right after she leaves, the pyromaniac arrives and sets Yusuke's house on fire. Yusuke panics, and Botan rushes off to find Kuwabara, who's on the other side of town. While out shopping, Keiko hears two men shouting about a fire on 4th Avenue and suddenly remembers that Yusuke lives there, prompting her to head back immediately. Botan eventually finds Kuwabara, and through his heightened spiritual awareness, he somehow picks up her message to help Yusuke, even though he can't actually see or hear her. Keiko arrives at Yusuke's house and remembers what he told her about protecting his body. Without hesitation, she runs inside, putting herself in serious danger. Yusuke desperately yells for her to stop, startling Sayaka when he cries out that he doesn't want to live if Keiko has to die in his place. Around the same time, Kuwabara reaches the scene and is told that Keiko ran into the burning house. Keiko manages to reach Yusuke's body, but before she can get him out safely, a piece of flaming debris collapses and blocks her path, trapping her completely. Botan says there's nothing that can be done, but Sayaka tells Yusuke that there is still one way to save Keiko, by throwing the spirit beast he's been carrying into the fire. The cost, however, would be losing his chance to return to life. Without hesitating, Yusuke throws the spirit beast into the flames. It begins to glow intensely, turning the red fire blue and clearing a path for Keiko to escape. At that moment, Kuwabara spots her inside and rushes in to help her carry Yusuke's body out. Once they make it outside, Kuwabara asks what's inside the blanket she's holding. When he realizes it's Yusuke's body, he's stunned and questions why she has it. Keiko tells him she'll explain everything once they're somewhere safe, and the two of them run off together. As Yusuke watches his rival holding Keiko, Botan tells him that because of the choice he made with the spirit beast, he can no longer remain in the human world and must return to the spirit world with her. Upset, Yusuke drifts away. Later that night, when he looks back at his house and sees Keiko, his mother, and Kuwabara all still believing he'll come back to life, it only makes him angrier. To him, it feels like they're clinging to a reality that will never come true. He finally tells Botan to take him wherever he's supposed to go, but suddenly, a voice interrupts them. Koenma appears and tells Yusuke that he's going to give him another chance at life. He explains that it was actually a good thing that Yusuke threw the golden egg into the fire, because if he had waited for it to hatch, it would have consumed him completely. Yusuke had been constantly giving off negative energy because of his attitude, and the spirit beast would have responded to that. Koenma goes on to say that Yusuke proved him more wrong than he ever expected. He turned out to be more than just a decent human being, choosing without hesitation to sacrifice his own chance at life to save Keiko. That kind of selflessness is rare, and Koenma believes that Yusuke's out-of-body experience may make him even more useful in the future. Realizing that he can still come back to life after saving Keiko, Yusuke finally feels relieved. Botan hugs him in celebration of his good fortune, and together with Sayaka, they celebrate his second chance. Later on, Yusuke is floating alongside Botan, openly complaining about two things he absolutely hates: waiting and being rushed, both of which he feels like he's been dealing with non-stop lately. He keeps ranting, even throwing in a comment about how busy a toddler can apparently be, when Koenma suddenly appears right next to him, catching him off guard. Yusuke immediately starts to complain about Koenma sneaking up on him, but Botan quickly covers his mouth and explains to Koenma that Yusuke is really just wondering when he'll be able to come back to life. Koenma responds simply by saying they need to hurry. They take off, and once they arrive at Yusuke's new apartment, courtesy of the fire, Koenma begins explaining the process of his revival. For Yusuke to return to life, the energy wavelengths of his soul and his body need to be perfectly aligned, which is scheduled to happen the following day. Koenma then adds an important detail. Yusuke's wavelength frequency is currently low, and if he misses the opportunity to act tomorrow, he won't get another chance for the next 52 years. On top of that, Koenma explains that Yusuke will need someone from the human world, someone who genuinely cares about him, to donate life energy by kissing him. Koenma opens a pathway connecting Yusuke's body to the spirit world so the transfer can happen, noting that Yusuke's body will glow gold in the morning. He also tells Yusuke that while his body prepares overnight, Yusuke must enter the dreams of 3 people who want him back the most and tell each of them what they need to do. If even one of them receives the message and kisses him the next day before midnight, he'll be able to return to his body. Once again, his mother is ruled out immediately, since she'll be spending the next few days constantly at a bar. Yusuke thinks about Keiko, and as he considers the third person, Kuwabara is shown waking up from a nightmare where he had to kiss Yusuke. The next morning, Keiko is sitting beside Yusuke's body, debating whether or not she should kiss him. She hesitates because his body isn't glowing gold like it was in her dream. Eventually, she decides to leave without kissing him. Koenma points out that she didn't see the glow because it won't fully appear until noon. Keiko heads to school, but she's soon called to the principal's office, where she soon finds out that her mother has been hospitalized after collapsing from work in the heat. Keiko chooses to stay by her mother's bedside, which is bad news for Yusuke since it means she won't have time to kiss him. Koenma suddenly appears again and tells Yusuke that his body is already fully prepared. Now all they need is the life energy. Yusuke and Botan head out to find Kuwabara, who's currently at an arcade. Yusuke phases through him with a punch, startling Kuwabara so badly that he immediately runs off after sensing something supernatural. Next, they try Atsuko, but that goes nowhere since she's busy getting herself drunk. With no other options left, they realize they have to find a way to reach Keiko. Suddenly, Botan comes up with an idea and leaves Yusuke and Koenma behind. She delivers the message through Keiko's mother, and after hearing it, Keiko rushes off to Yusuke with less than 5 minutes remaining. As the glow around Yusuke's body begins to fade, Keiko kisses him at the very last possible moment. Thinking she was too late, Keiko breaks down in tears, but then Yusuke suddenly wakes up, now fully back in his body, and tells her she made it just in time. Overcome with emotion, Keiko hugs him tightly. Botan assumes that everything is finally over, but Koenma corrects her, saying that this is only the beginning. Now that Yusuke is back, the real ordeal is about to begin. The next day, Yusuke goes out for a walk, just enjoying the fact that he's alive again. 2 guys try to rob him, but he's in such a good mood that he casually walks right past them, leaving them confused. Shortly after, a woman who looks like a fortune teller calls out to Yusuke from an alley and tells him that he has a mission to complete. Yusuke brushes her off and walks away, saying he doesn't have any missions. As he continues on, he overhears 2 students talking about kids from Ruga Fuji Junior High who have been trying to take over Kuwabara's territory with Yusuke gone. Curious, Yusuke goes into a nearby coffee shop to check things out for himself. Inside, he sees exactly what the students were talking about. Sitting not far from the group, Yusuke observes them and quickly figures out who their leader is based on how he carries himself. What really stands out to him though, is that the leader has horns. One of the thugs mentioned that Kuwabara is supposed to meet them and might not show up, but the leader responds that he's testing Kuwabara's loyalty by ordering him to steal a comic book from the most heavily guarded store in town and bring it to him. Yusuke immediately thinks to himself that Kuwabara would never do something like that, since it goes against his honor code. Just then, Kuwabara walks into the coffee shop with his gang and the comic books. However, the leader, Sakamoto, notices the receipt, realizing that Kuwabara didn't actually steal them. Sakamoto orders Kuwabara to kneel and apologize, and as Yusuke watches his rival humiliate himself, he wonders what kind of leverage they have over him that's stopping him from fighting back. That question is answered when one of the thugs pulls a kitten out of a bag. Everything clicks. Kuwabara's cat, Ekichi, is being held hostage. They move outside into an alley, where Sakamoto orders Kuwabara to punch his own 3 friends in exchange for Ekichi. Kuwabara refuses. Sakamoto then threatens the cat's life, but Kuwabara still won't comply, so he orders the thug to kill Ekichi. Before that can happen, Yusuke suddenly steps in, punching the thug and catching the cat midair. Stunning everyone with his return from the dead, Yusuke immediately jumps into the fight. A brawl breaks out, and when Sakamoto tries to escape, he trips and is knocked out by Yusuke, away from Kuwabara and the others. Right after that, Yusuke notices a small demon emerge from Sakamoto's mouth. He grabs it, demanding to know what it is, when the fortune teller from earlier appears and explains the situation. The creature, Jiyaki, the demon Yusuke caught, is one that burrows into the evil parts of humans and is notoriously difficult to track down, until Yusuke's instincts led him straight to it. The fortune teller tells Yusuke that he has the natural ability to become a spirit detective, which only confuses him more. She then removes her disguise, and Yusuke realizes it was Botan the entire time. Another voice cuts in. It's Koenma again. He officially appoints Yusuke as the spirit detective of Earth, and before Yusuke can even ask what this really means, Koenma disappears. Botan soon follows, taking the captured demon back to the spirit world. The next day, Yusuke heads back to school. When he tries to jump into a conversation between two students who are talking about him, they panic and run away, convinced he's a ghost. Keiko then approaches him, which immediately brings back the memory of her kissing him. The two walk to school together, and when their classmates see Yusuke, they're completely shocked, having all assumed he was dead. Yusuke jokes that maybe he should have stayed dead, but Kuwabara taps him on the back and tells him not to worry, saying Yusuke will be a ghost soon enough after Kuwabara defeats him. Principal Takanaka shows up and smacks Yusuke on the back of the head, welcoming him back to school. The hit annoys Yusuke and makes him think about skipping class, but Keiko scolds him. Watching from above, Mr. Iwamoto scowls when he sees that Yusuke has returned. Later, Yusuke is seen skipping gym class and hanging out on the school roof. He pulls an item out of his pocket, the psychic spyglass that Botan gave him from Koenma the night before. Apparently, it's one of the several tools issued to spirit detectives and can see through walls, and even clothing. Botan had explained that using detective items requires something called spirit energy, meaning Yusuke will have to master each item gradually as he gets stronger. Once gym class ends, students from Yusuke's class realize that their valuables are missing. When Yusuke comes back from his break, suspicion immediately falls on him, and the students begin accusing him of stealing their belongings, even though Keiko tries to stand up for him. Yusuke is then shown being punished by Mr. Iwamoto in the teacher's lounge, but Principal Takanaka steps in and asks Iwamoto if he has any actual evidence. Iwamoto claims that Yusuke was the only student skipping gym class when the items disappeared, and even makes a rude remark about Yusuke's mother. This enrages Yusuke, who tries to punch him, exactly what Iwamoto was hoping for so he could suspend him. Before anything happens, Koenma suddenly appears, freezing time and frantically explaining Yusuke's first mission. 3 criminals have stolen the great artifacts of darkness from King Enma's vault and escaped into the human world. Yusuke says that he has his own problems to deal with, but Koenma insists that the situation is urgent. If the artifacts are used to their full power, the human world would be thrown into complete chaos. Yusuke stubbornly refuses to help until his name is cleared, prompting Koenma to tell him to take out his psychic spyglass and look at Mr. Iwamoto's left pocket. When Yusuke does, he sees all of the missing items stuffed inside. Koenma resumes time, and Yusuke immediately confronts Iwamoto, pulling a dragon pen from his pocket. Principal Takanaka demands an explanation, but Iwamoto denies everything, claims that Yusuke must have planted the items on him, and storms out of the room. Koenma tells Yusuke it's time to get to work, but Yusuke says he'll start after he gets his revenge. To help him move on so they can focus on more serious matters, Koenma explains one of Yusuke's new spirit detective abilities, the spirit gun. Yusuke points his fingers at Mr. Iwamoto and fires, knocking him unconscious. Koenma explains that after dying, Yusuke became more attuned to his spirit energy and can now channel it through his finger. The spirit gun is stronger than a normal punch, but until Yusuke improves his control, he can only use it once per day. With that settled, Koenma explains more about the mission and the stolen artifacts. The Shadow Sword sword turns anyone it cuts into a monster. The Forlorn Hope releases a strange power during a full moon. The Orb of Bast captures living souls, especially those of children. All three artifacts were created by the universe itself, but they're extremely dangerous in the wrong hands. Understanding the stakes, Yusuke officially accepts the mission as Earth's spirit detective. Yusuke begins searching the town for the three criminals, but isn't sure where to start. He lies down on a bench when he notices the sky suddenly change color and sees a large crowd forming around a child. Pushing his way through, Yusuke sees that a young boy has fainted. When he notices the child's soul leaving his body, Yusuke realizes it must be connected to one of the artifacts. He follows the drifting soul through town until it leads him to a dark alley, where he eventually loses sight of it. Looking around, Yusuke spots a suspicious man and uses the psychic spyglass, confirming that the criminal is carrying the Orb of Bast. Before Yusuke can confront him, a group of thugs surround him, trying to rob him. Yusuke beats them all, but by the time the fight ends, the criminal has disappeared. Back in the spirit world, an ogre reports new information about the criminals to Koenma. Their names are Kurama, Hiei, and Goki, the one Yusuke is currently tracking. Very little is known about Kurama and Hiei, as neither have any prior record, but Goki does, with murder being one of his preferred crimes. Botan suddenly bursts into the room, accusing Koenma of putting Yusuke's life in danger. The criminals are emitting massive amounts of spirit energy, far more than someone at Yusuke's level should be dealing with. Koenma admits that he had no choice but to assign Yusuke the case. Botan insists that she be allowed to train him first, but Koenma says there's no time. They only have 1 week to recover the artifacts. In 1 week, King Enma will return from vacation, and if he discovers the artifacts are missing, his rage could be so great that he might even sink an entire continent trying to retrieve them. Alarmed by the thought of enraging King Enma, Botan agrees to help however she can and heads to the human world. Meanwhile, while tracking Goki, Yusuke arrives near a forest and notices a strange light coming from its center. Inside, Hiei is practicing with a shadow sword and talks with Goki about creating a demon army by cutting down humans in town. Goki agrees, and Hiei explains that on the night of a full moon, they'll use all 3 stolen artifacts to gain complete control over the human world. At that moment, Kurama steps out of the shadows and announces that he's withdrawing from their alliance. Furious, Goki demands that Kurama hand over the Forlorn Hope, but Kurama refuses, saying he needs it to accomplish his own goals. Goki attempts to punch Kurama, but Yusuke interrupts by walking toward the group. Hiei asks who Yusuke is, and Yusuke smugly introduces himself. Hiei mocks Yusuke for his weak spirit energy, and while this happens, Kurama quietly leaves, followed shortly after by Hiei, leaving Goki alone with Yusuke. The two exchange words before Goki pulls out the Orb of Bast, releasing the soul of the child from earlier. He attempts to eat the soul, which enrages Yusuke. Yusuke kicks him in the stomach, forcing Goki to spit the soul out, then punches him in the face, knocking him to the ground. The child's soul escapes, and Yusuke picks up the Orb of Bast, thinking the fight is over. Suddenly, Goki appears behind him and transforms into his demon form, the Kukanki, a creature that feeds on living souls by tearing its victims apart while they're still alive. Goki slashes Yusuke, then rips a tree out of the ground and swings it at him. Desperate, Yusuke remembers the spirit gun and tries to use it, only to realize he already wasted his one shot earlier at school. As Goki closes in, Yusuke nervously wonders if he's about to die all over again. As the fight drags on, Yusuke is completely overwhelmed. Goki dominates him at every turn, and just as Goki is about to choke Yusuke to death, strange lights suddenly begin to shine throughout the forest, and a familiar voice echoes through the area. Believing that villagers from the human world are approaching, Goki decides to flee, leaving Yusuke behind. Yusuke, badly injured, passes out. When he finally wakes up, Yusuke finds himself back in his room. His mother Atsuko approaches him and asks if he's okay, only to immediately smack him hard on the head, assuming he got into another fight. She then breaks down crying, terrified that he's going to get himself killed again. As Yusuke tries to piece together what happened, Botan enters the room. From Atsuko, Yusuke learns that Botan was the one who saved him from Goki and carried him back home so he could recover. Botan quietly tells Yusuke that Koenma gave her a human form, which is why Atsuko can see her. This allows Botan to stay by Yusuke's side to help him with his missions in the human world. Atsuko leaves the room to make some food, giving Yusuke and Botan time to talk about the mission. Yusuke asks how Botan managed to find him, and she introduces him to another spirit detective item, the Demon Compass, item number 2 of 7. The Demon Compass can detect the direction and distance of a demon that's already been identified. Botan used it to track Goki and locate Yusuke. She also warns him that the remaining 2 criminals are even stronger than Goki and reminds him that he only has 1 week left to finish the mission. Watching from the spirit world, Koenma grows increasingly anxious about what will happen if Yusuke fails to recover all 3 artifacts in time. Back in the human world, while Atsuko is eating, the television airs a news report about 4 children in a nearby town who have suddenly fallen into comas. Yusuke and Botan overhear this, and Yusuke asks how long it takes for the souls inside Goki's stomach to be fully digested. Botan tells him it takes at most 1 day. Even though he hasn't fully recovered, Yusuke gets ready to leave, knowing that it's a new day and that he can use his spirit gun again. Before they go, Botan gives him another spirit detective item, the Concentration Ring, item number 3 of 7. The ring multiplies the user's spirit energy several times over. Botan explains that she originally planned to wait until Yusuke's spirit energy was much stronger before giving it to him, but now seems like the right time. With Yusuke's current strength, the ring will give his attacks an enormous boost, but it'll leave him completely exhausted afterward, so it should only be used as a last resort. With that, the 2 head out to find Goki. On the outskirts of town, Goki is seen playing with the Orb of Bast. A young girl hands it back to him, and he immediately steals her soul. Yusuke finds Goki and calls him out, prompting Goki to transform into his demon form once again. Yusuke charges in and lands a punch to Goki's stomach, but instead of hurting Goki, the impact hurts Yusuke. Goki's skin is rock solid. Goki swings at him but misses, and Yusuke tries to stab him with a large stake, only to fail. Goki takes advantage of this opening and slams Yusuke into the ground. As Yusuke starts to panic, he considers using the spirit gun but hesitates, remembering Botan's warning. Goki kicks and stomps on Yusuke, savoring his screams of pain, until Botan throws something onto Goki's back, distracting him. She runs as fast as she can, then circles back to Yusuke. Goki grabs Yusuke, opening his mouth wide to devour him, but Yusuke shoves a wooden stick into Goki's mouth, forcing it open. Using the power of the concentration ring, Yusuke fires his spirit gun straight into Goki's mouth, killing him instantly. The children's souls are freed and return to their bodies, and the Orb of Bast is successfully recovered. As Yusuke and Botan head back home, the Demon Compass suddenly reacts, signaling that another demon is nearby. Yusuke encounters Kurama, who tells him that he has no intention of fighting and asks for a favor instead. Kurama requests 3 days, promising that he will return the Forlorn Hope afterward. Back at home, Botan treats Yusuke's injuries and warns him about what's coming. In 3 days, the full moon will rise, and the Forlorn Hope's power will reach its peak. When activated under a full moon, the artifact reflects the strongest desire of whoever looks into it and grants that wish, but only in exchange for something of equal value. Despite the danger, Yusuke tells Botan that he feels he should trust Kurama. He remembers overhearing Kurama withdrawing from the alliance and recalls that he seemed more sad than evil. Just then, Atsuko bursts in the room, inviting everyone to dinner. From a nearby building, Kurama is shown watching them from a distance. The next day, Botan leaves to meet with Koenma to gather more information about the Forlorn Hope, telling Yusuke to be careful when he meets Kurama. Yusuke meets Kurama at a hospital, where Kurama leads him to room 501. Inside is Shiori Minamino, Kurama's human mother. During their conversation, Yusuke hears her call Kurama Shuichi, which confuses him. Later, the two are seen on the hospital rooftop, where Kurama begins explaining everything. Shuichi is his human name, while his true name is Yoko. He reveals that he was once a spirit fox who lived for hundreds of years, gaining immense demon powers over time. Eventually, he grew bored and devoted himself to mastering the art of breaking ancient codes and seals. 15 years ago, however, he made a critical mistake and was badly wounded by someone pursuing him. With the last of his strength, he fled into the human world and was reborn into a human family. His original plan was to recover his spirit energy and leave after 10 years. That plan changed when his mother fell ill. Kurama chose to stay with her rather than abandon her. Around that same time, Goki and Hiei appeared, with Hiei seeking Kurama's expertise. Kurama then remembered the power of the Forlorn Hope. He asks Yusuke to let him use the artifact to save his mother's life, promising to accept whatever punishment follows. Yusuke asks why a demon would go so far for a human. Kurama answers that maybe it's guilt. He believes he caused her suffering and feels responsible for breaking her spirit, having once believed himself superior to her. He even thinks he may have caused her illness. When Yusuke asks why he's sharing all of this, Kurama says that maybe he just needed someone to know, and he sensed that Yusuke would trust him. Suddenly, a nurse rushes out and tells Kurama that his mother's condition has worsened. She's in critical condition and expected to die that very night. With the full moon rising, Kurama decides he has no other option but to use the Forlorn Hope. Yusuke asks if he knows what the artifact will demand in return, and Kurama confirms that it will take the life of the person making the wish, his own. At the same time in the spirit world, Botan receives the same information from Koenma and immediately heads to warn Yusuke. Kurama activates the Forlorn Hope, which reflects the image of his mother. Yusuke suddenly tells him to stop, insisting there has to be another way. As the artifact begins draining Kurama's life in exchange for his mother's, Yusuke interrupts and places his hand on the mirror alongside Kurama's. He tells the Forlorn Hope to take his life instead. Kurama tries to stop him, but Yusuke argues that saving his mother would mean nothing if she had to live the rest of her life grieving his death, drawing a parallel to his own mother mourning him. A blinding light bursts from the Forlorn Hope as Botan arrives on the scene. When the light fades, both Yusuke and Kurama are lying face down. Kurama is the first to rise and rushes to his mother's side. Botan approaches Yusuke, terrified of what she might find, but Yusuke gets up, relieved to still be alive. He realizes that if he had died, his own mother would have been left heartbroken, but on the bright side, he successfully recovered the Forlorn Hope. The mirror speaks to Yusuke, explaining that because of his selfless intentions, it granted Kurama's wish without taking anything in return. Soon after, Kurama is told that his mother's illness is completely gone and that she'll make a full recovery. With 2 artifacts recovered, Yusuke celebrates with Botan, knowing only one remains. Watching from the spirit world, Koenma is irritated by their celebration, fully aware that the final artifact, the Shadow Sword, will be far more difficult to retrieve. Hiei possesses it, and he's anything but an ordinary demon. After learning that 2 of his comrades have been defeated, Hiei decides it's time to act. He plans to steal the 2 recovered artifacts back from Yusuke and kill him. His goal is to use them, along with the final artifact, the Shadow Sword, to conquer the human world. The Shadow Sword has the power to turn anyone it cuts into the lowest level demon, and the only thing that can undo that transformation is the sword itself. The next morning, Yusuke is cutting class again, this time hanging out and talking with Botan. She tells him that Koenma has decided not to punish Kurama for stealing one of the artifacts, then shifts the conversation to Hiei, the demon who still possesses the final artifact. Botan explains that Kurama is the strongest of the 3 demons they've dealt with so far, and is willing to go to any lengths to get what he wants. Their conversation is interrupted when Keiko shows up looking for Yusuke and sees him talking with Botan. Botan walks over to greet Keiko, but Yusuke smacks Botan over the head and reminds her that Keiko knows nothing about the spirit world or who Botan really is, and that she needs to stay out of it. Botan runs off, leaving Yusuke to explain things to Keiko. Keiko, however, assumes that something's going on between the 2 of them and walks away, with Yusuke chasing after her. Watching all of this from a distance with his third eye, Hiei becomes confident in his plan to reclaim the artifacts and sets his sights on Keiko. On her way home from school, Keiko is lost in thought about what she saw between between Yusuke and Botan. As she walks, she passes by Hiei, who suddenly uses the shadow sword and knocks her unconscious. Back at school, Yusuke is alerted by the demon compass that Hiei is nearby. He rushes out, following the compass's direction, and runs into Botan along the way. Botan explains that Hiei contacted her telepathically and told her that he has Keiko held hostage. He won't return her unless Yusuke hands over the other two artifacts. They arrive at a warehouse, and once inside, they're confronted by a group of humans being controlled by Hiei. Botan explains that for Hiei to control so many people at once, he must possess something known as the Jagan. Hiei then appears in front of them, confirming her suspicion. The third eye glowing red on his forehead is revealed to be the Jagan. Two of the possessed men bring Keiko forward, still unconscious from earlier. Hiei demands that Yusuke hand over the Orb of Bast and the Forlorn Hope in exchange for Keiko's safety. Yusuke agrees and gives him both artifacts. As Hiei gloats about his plan finally coming together, Yusuke tells him that now that Keiko is safe, he won't just let Hiei walk away. Yusuke throws a punch, but it misses, and Hiei laughs at how slow he is. Hiei then reveals that he's still in control of Keiko's life. Yusuke and Botan look over at her and see a slit forming on her forehead, slowly opening to reveal a red Jagan eye. Hiei explains that he struck Keiko earlier with a shadow sword, and once the eye fully opens, she'll be transformed into a low-level demon. Botan uses her spiritual power to try and suppress the eye from opening further. Hiei warns that if Yusuke can't defeat him quickly, Botan's energy will run out, killing her, and Keiko will eventually complete her transformation. Hiei goes on to explain that the antidote for the eye is hidden inside the hilt of the shadow sword, daring Yusuke to take it if he can. Suddenly, Yusuke shoots into the air and slams his fist into Hiei's jaw, catching him completely off guard and knocking him down. Shocked by Yusuke's sudden increase in speed, Hiei realizes that Yusuke is the type of fighter whose power grows when the lives of his friends are in danger. He admits that while Yusuke managed to hit him, he failed to disarm him, and Hiei won't be caught off guard so easily again. Hiei uses his incredible speed to overwhelm Yusuke, but Yusuke manages to track his movements and lands another punch to Hiei's jaw as he attacks. Enraged, Hiei transforms into his full demonic form, his skin turning green. The Jagan eye on Keiko feeds off Hiei's rising energy, making it even harder for Botan to contain. As Yusuke watches in shock, Hiei completes his transformation, with eyes sprouting all over his body. He charges forward and starts forcing Yusuke back. Outside of the warehouse, Kurama arrives, noting that Hiei must have transformed out of desperation against Yusuke. Inside, Yusuke is struggling. He's suddenly trapped in a spiritual binding and can't move, leaving him completely at Hiei's mercy. Hiei rushes in to deliver the finishing blow with the shadow sword, but at the last second, Kurama steps in front of Yusuke and takes the blade himself, shocking everyone. Using his own blood, Kurama blinds Hiei's Jagan eye, giving Yusuke a brief chance to recover. Kurama explains that the Jagan only amplifies Hiei's demon powers, and without it, those powers are useless. Yusuke tells Kurama that he didn't need to get stabbed for him, but Kurama responds that he's only alive because of Yusuke and wants to repay that debt. He adds that he'll use what strength he has left to help prevent Keiko from fully transforming. Yusuke now stands before Hiei stronger than ever, his spirit energy continuing to rise the more dangerous the situation becomes. He trades blows with Hiei, landing hits even as he takes damage himself. Eventually, Hiei's speed overwhelms him again, forcing Yusuke back. Realizing he can't win in a straight fight, Yusuke spots something in the distance and appears to run away. As Hiei gives chase, Yusuke suddenly turns around and fires his spirit gun. Hiei dodges the blast with his speed, and Yusuke collapses from exhaustion after using the attack. Believing he's won, Hiei lowers his guard, only for the spirit gun blast to suddenly rebound and strike him from behind. The attack had reflected off of the Forlorn Hope, which was positioned behind him, catching Hiei completely off guard. Hiei falls unconscious, and Yusuke is victorious. Yusuke gives Keiko the antidote from the Shadow Sword, completely removing the Jagan eye, and thanks Kurama for his help. Curious about how Yusuke pulled it off, Botan asks how he knew the spirit gun would bounce off a mirror. Yusuke admits he didn't know. It was a pure gamble, a 50-50 chance. If it hadn't worked, he would have definitely died. Botan and Kurama are stunned by this revelation, and with that, Yusuke recovers all 3 artifacts, and his mission is finally complete. As Yusuke returns to his usual habit of cutting class, he and Botan reflect on the insane week they've just had. Botan tells him that the relics were sent back to the spirit world just in time for King Enma's return. However, because the forlorn hope was shattered and the shadow sword was stained with blood, King Enma realized what had happened. Still, since the artifacts were recovered, he only gave Koenma a minor punishment: a spanking. As Yusuke laughs about it, Keiko suddenly shows up, still having no explanation for anything that happened to her. Once again, she assumes something is going on between Yusuke and Botan, and Yusuke immediately runs after her. A few days later, Yusuke is shown hiking through the woods. Earlier that week, Botan had told him about a new mission from Koenma. A powerful fighter, psychic, and human acquaintance of Koenma's named Genkai was preparing to pass on her power to someone she deemed worthy. The problem was a demon named Rando, who planned to steal Genkai's power for himself and use it to spread chaos. Rando had already stolen the power of 99 psychics and was now after one more, intending to test his strength on humans. He takes pleasure in killing, pushing himself until he finds the limits of his power, and with Genkai's techniques, that limit could take a very long time to reach. Yusuke initially said he'd rather relax and enjoy his 3-day weekend, but Botan ended up bribing him with a ticket to a world battle match if he accepted the mission, which convinced Yusuke to go along with it. Back in the present, Yusuke climbs the long set of stairs leading up to Genkai's dojo. When he reaches the top, he's surprised to see hundreds of other fighters gathered there. He quickly realizes that Genkai is hosting a competition, and the winner will inherit her power. While looking around at the other challengers, Yusuke runs into Kuwabara, who explains why he's there. Over the past couple of weeks, Kuwabara's spiritual awareness has grown dramatically, to the point where he can barely focus on anything, including fighting. Hoping Genkai could help him control and refine that ability, he sought her out. Kuwabara also tells Yusuke just how powerful Genkai is rumored to be, especially because of her mastery of the Spirit Wave technique. At that moment, the doors of the dojo open, revealing Genkai herself, a small, elderly woman. Without wasting time, Genkai announces the start of the first round. She brings out a large pot and explains that each contestant will draw a piece of paper from it to determine whether they advance. If the paper turns red, they move on to the next round. The reason for this test, she explains, is that only those with sufficiently strong spiritual power can cause the paper to turn red. Both Yusuke and Kuwabara successfully draw red papers, while many of the other contestants fail. 2 of the eliminated fighters grow angry over what they see as an unfair process and charge at Genkai. She simply glances in their direction and releases a burst of spiritual power that sends them flying backward, smashing into a gate. The crowd is stunned by her strength, and the display further motivates Yusuke and Kuwabara to continue. Before moving on, Yusuke pulls out his demon compass to see if he can locate Rando among the contestants. The device immediately overloads and burns out, unable to handle the strength it's detecting, confirming that Rando is indeed present. The second round takes place inside the dojo. Inside, the contestants find a variety of machines and video games set up for the trial. The featured machines include a rock, paper, scissors game that tests spiritual awareness, a punching machine that measures spiritual strength, and a karaoke machine designed to test how well one's energy can adapt and grow stronger. To advance, a contestant must earn a passing score on at least 2 of the 3 machines. These challenges are meant to filter out anyone lacking genuine spiritual talent. Kuwabara steps up to the punching machine first and scores 129 points. Yusuke follows and scores 155, which catches Genkai's attention and makes her note his strong destructive potential. Kuwabara then earns the high score on the rock, paper, scissors machine, prompting Genkai to comment on his impressive spirit world awareness. Another contestant later surpasses Yusuke's punching score with 175 points. The round continues with various fighters testing themselves on the karaoke and rock, paper, scissors machines. By the end of the trial, only 20 contestants, including Yusuke and Kuwabara, advance to the next stage. The third round sends the remaining fighters into a dangerous forest, with one contestant remarking that it feels almost alive. Genkai explains that the forest, known as the Dark Forest, is filled with danger at every turn and serves as the sanctuary for some of the oldest and most primitive demons. Only the strongest will make it through to the giant tree on the other side. Anyone who reaches it within 2 hours passes the test. While the explanation frightens some of the contestants into quitting, most decide to try anyway. One competitor attempts to discourage Yusuke from continuing, but Yusuke ignores the warning, instead wondering which of them might be Rando. Kuwabara also chooses to continue. The group begins their run through the forest, with Genkai effortlessly passing them and telling them that she'll wait at the end of the trial. She advises them to rely on their spirit awareness if they want to survive. Some contestants fall victim to traps hidden throughout the forest, while others manage to push through using their abilities. Yusuke decides to take a straight path, believing it will get him to the goal faster. However, he's confronted by a massive swarm of demon bats led by their commander, Baldock, who threatens to kill him if he doesn't leave the forest. Meanwhile, with only 15 minutes left, Kuwabara becomes the first contestant to reach the end. Yusuke refuses to back down from Baldock, and although the demon bat is fast, he's nowhere near as dangerous as the enemies Yusuke has already faced. After spending an hour and a half memorizing Baldock's attack patterns, Yusuke grows irritated and finally beats him into submission. When the 2-hour time limit expires, only 7 challengers have emerged from the forest. Kuwabara looks around anxiously for Yusuke, worried that he won't make it. Genkai announces that she won't wait any longer and that they must move on to the next round. Just then, Yusuke steps out of the forest, explaining that he was delayed by a large bat demon. Genkai is impressed, revealing that Baldock was one of her strongest defenders. Because of this, she allows Yusuke to advance along with the other 7 competitors into the next round. The 8 fighters who made it this far move on to the final round, where they will be paired off against each other in a tournament. Genkai explains the rules plainly. They'll keep fighting until only one person is left standing. Opponents can either be killed or incapacitated. She doesn't care which. The twist, however, is that all the fights will take place in complete darkness. Genkai insists that true fighters should be able to see using their spirit energy alone, and whoever walks away at the end will be the winner. Yusuke shrugs this off, saying it doesn't sound much like a regular street fight, but Kuwabara disagrees. He says he's been feeling a strong evil presence following the group ever since they left the forest, though it still hasn't revealed itself. Thinking about Rando, Yusuke asks Kuwabara if he can identify which contestant might be the demon, but Kuwabara can't tell yet. At Genkai's command, everyone introduces themselves, and then arrows suddenly drop from the ceiling. Each fighter picks one up, and the arrows determine the order of the upcoming matches. The first match is between Kazemaru, a ninja bodyguard, and Kuroda, a contract hitman. Kuroda asks Genkai if he's allowed to kill his opponent, and Genkai once again gives her approval, stating that she'll train whoever wins in the end, regardless of their morals. This shocks Yusuke. The 2 fighters step into the darkness, and the match begins. At first, no one can tell what's happening, except Kuwabara, who says it looks like Kuroda is overpowering Kazemaru. In the end, Kazemaru barely manages to win by releasing a powerful blast of spirit energy from his hand, killing Kuroda. Yusuke wonders if that attack is similar to his spirit gun when he suddenly hears Botan's voice. He runs off to find her, and Botan explains that unlike Yusuke, Kazemaru has trained extensively and doesn't get exhausted after using his spirit blast. Because of that, she warns Yusuke not to rely on energy attacks alone if he ends up fighting him. Kuwabara catches up to Yusuke and immediately assumes he's cheating on Keiko with Botan, but Botan introduces herself properly, surprising Kuwabara with her powers. Yusuke explains that Botan is the Grim Reaper and his assistant as a spirit detective. He then tells Kuwabara that the bad feeling he's been having about one of the contestants is because one of them is actually a demon, and Yusuke needs to figure out who it is before they get Genkai's power. Once Kuwabara understands the situation, he immediately switches gears and starts hitting on Botan, only to be interrupted by Genkai, who threatens to disqualify both him and Yusuke if they don't get back to the arena. What Yusuke doesn't realize is that Genkai overheard their entire conversation and now knows he's connected to Koenma. The second match takes place between Shorin, a young psychic still in training, and Shinpo, a wandering fighter. The battle is close, but Shorin comes out on top, though the fight itself happens off screen. The third match is between Kuwabara and a swordsman named Musashi. Musashi is a master samurai, and while Botan worries about Kuwabara's chances, Yusuke points out that Kuwabara's determination is incredible and hopes that will be enough. Musashi warns Kuwabara to back out while he still can, but when Kuwabara refuses, Musashi catches him off guard and knocks him down. Musashi then reveals that he knows all about Kuwabara's spirit awareness, but explains that he has an ability of his own, the power to completely mask his spirit energy and become invisible. He's also experienced that fighting in total darkness, putting Kuwabara at a serious disadvantage. As everyone watches, Kuwabara gets knocked around brutally, though he refuses to give up. Musashi then reveals his trump card, a wooden sword carved from an ancient tree, specifically suited for channeling spiritual energy. He brings the sword down on Kuwabara again and again, striking him with spirit energy layered into each blow. But after the assault ends, the tip of the sword unexpectedly snaps. Musashi comments on how incredible Kuwabara's spirit energy is and assumes the fight is over. Instead, Kuwabara grabs the broken end of the sword and slowly stands back up. When Musashi charges in again to finish the fight, Kuwabara, in desperation, accidentally channels his spirit energy into the broken blade, forming his own technique, the Spirit Sword. Genkai explains that this is materialization, the act of shaping spirit energy into a physical form. Just as shocked as everyone else, Kuwabara knocks Musashi out with a single strike. Badly injured but victorious, he advances to the semifinals. The next match pits Yusuke against Kibano, the fighter who scored 175 on the punching machine earlier. Noticing Yusuke's overconfidence, Genkai flicks a lit cigarette toward his face, barely missing him as it rolls into the darkness. When the fight begins, Kibano says that unlike Yusuke, he can see exactly where his opponent is. Kuwabara, using his superior spiritual awareness to see in the dark, warns Yusuke to be careful and points out that Kibano is wearing a strange helmet. Kibano explains that the helmet is his own invention. It blocks his normal senses and reroutes that brain power into detecting a person's spirit energy instead. Because Yusuke's spirit energy spikes when he's in danger, it makes him incredibly easy to track. With this advantage, Kibano quickly takes control of the fight. Yusuke manages to land a few hits, but they barely slow him down, and Kibano's counterattacks are brutal. Yusuke struggles to land a decisive blow, made even worse by the fact that he can't see what's happening around him. Confident he has the upper hand, Kibano reveals another technique. According to Genkai, he draws energy from the surrounding matter and channels it directly into his muscles for a sudden burst of strength. Still unable to see, Yusuke is caught completely off guard as Kibano slams him with a devastating clothesline from his enhanced arm, stunning everyone watching as Yusuke lies helpless. Kibano tells Yusuke that if he wants to live, he should give up now. Yusuke, however, forces himself back to his feet, refusing to quit. Kibano mocks him, pointing out that he's already burned through a lot of energy. From the sidelines, Genkai notices that under normal circumstances this would be true, but Yusuke's spirit energy is unusual. It reacts to desperation by growing stronger. When Kibano attacks again, Yusuke grabs his arm, trying to break it, but Kibano's raw strength overwhelms him. He lifts Yusuke up and violently throws him aside. With both close range and long range options seemingly cut off, things are looking worse and worse for Yusuke. Even so, Kibano still can't force him to admit defeat. Determined to end the fight, Kibano uses the same technique again to boost his strength and charges in. At the same time, Yusuke quietly begins channeling his own spirit energy into his finger, preparing the spirit gun. Feeling the tension in Yusuke's body, Kibano assumes he's shaking out of fear, especially since he can't see anything in the darkness. Instead, Yusuke shouts that he was powering up and fires the spirit gun. The blast slams into Kibano's head, shattering his helmet. Stunned, Kibano asks how Yusuke was able to see him. Yusuke explains that when Kibano threw him earlier, he secretly slipped the cigarette Genkai had tossed earlier into Kibano's belt, giving him a fixed point to aim at with the spirit gun. Kibano collapses unconscious, and with that, Yusuke wins the match and advances to the semifinals. Genkai then announces the first semifinal match, Kazemaru versus an already exhausted Yusuke. This puts Yusuke in an even more desperate situation. He's already used his spirit gun for the day, and now he has to face a new opponent who can fire a much stronger blast, all while running on fumes. On top of that, Rando could still be either one of the two remaining fighters, meaning Yusuke has a 50-50 chance of fighting him while being completely worn out. The group moves to a new location, the Wilderness of the Spirits, an ancient battlefield where an entire army once descended into madness, leaving behind wandering, restless souls. Genkai explains that in this place, spirit energy overwhelms the body, making it the ideal environment for using spirit power. While Kazemaru immediately begins to feel power, Yusuke only feels weaker and can only hope that Kazemaru isn't Rando in disguise. Kazemaru quickly gains the upper hand against an exhausted Yusuke. Desperate to end things with a single move, Yusuke throws everything he has into an uppercut, but barely misses. Realizing that Yusuke still has some strength left, and knowing that a clean uppercut would have finished him, Kazemaru switches tactics and attacks with his shurikens. To Yusuke's shock, the shurikens don't simply fly past him, they curve around and come back like boomerangs. Kazemaru explains that the blades lock onto a person's spirit energy, tracking them relentlessly and capable of staying airborne for days until they hit their target. Thinking fast, Yusuke spots a tree in the distance and uses it as a decoy, causing the shurikens to slam into it. Several of them explode on impact. To Yusuke's surprise, the tips of the blades are packed with gunpowder. Now being chased by the remaining shurikens and running out of options, Yusuke rushes toward Kuwabara and tells him that the rest of the tournament is up to him. Yusuke plans to sacrifice himself by triggering an explosion that would kill both him and Kazemaru. Realizing what Yusuke is trying to do, Kazemaru prepares to use the same special attack that won him his first match to finish Yusuke off. Suddenly, Yusuke vanishes right in front of him. A stunned Kazemaru is then struck by his own returning shurikens, which explode and take him out instantly. Botan and Kuwabara are left confused by Yusuke's sudden disappearance, until they see a hand rising out of a small pond nearby. It turns out that Yusuke accidentally fell into the pond while charging at Kazemaru, causing him to disappear from sight and unintentionally setting up the shuriken backfire that won him the match. With that, Yusuke advances to the final round and waits to see who will win the next match between Kuwabara and Shorin. Botan approaches Yusuke and quietly tells him that they may have narrowed things down. Kazemaru couldn't have been Rando. If he were, he would have reverted to his true form when he was defeated. With that realization, they both reach the same conclusion. Shorin must be Rando in disguise. Kuwabara starts getting overconfident when he doesn't sense any power coming from Shorin. Both Botan and Yusuke are confused by this, since Shorin was the last person on Botan's list of possible demon suspects. From the spirit world, Koenma watches and explains that Rando doesn't care about appearances or recognition. His focus is hunting in secrecy and increasing his power. Out of the 99 psychics he's already defeated, not a single one has ever seen his true face, or at least lived to tell about it. That's when it hits Botan. If Shorin really is Rando, then Kuwabara is completely outmatched. Yusuke tries to warn Kuwabara and convince him to back out, explaining what's going on, but Kuwabara refuses and insists he's ready to fight. The match between Kuwabara and Shorin begins, and Kuwabara immediately lands a punch that sends Shorin crashing to the ground. Shorin lunges back in to attack, but Kuwabara easily dodges and knocks him down again. This completely shocks Yusuke and Botan, since Shorin looks incredibly weak. They start questioning whether Rando even entered the competition at all, because they aren't sensing any overwhelming power. That's when Shorin reveals his secret. The nature of his spirit energy suddenly changes, and he unleashes a technique called the Circles of Inferno, firing multiple fireballs straight at a stunned Kuwabara. Kuwabara, however, has his own trick ready. He summons his spirit sword and effortlessly deflects Shorin's fireballs right back at him, knocking Shorin down again. Yusuke comments that Kuwabara becomes a completely different fighter when he uses the spirit sword, and admits that he might actually have a real chance of winning. Shorin then begins chanting something under his breath, something only Genkai recognizes as the dwarf invocation technique. She explains to Yusuke that the creators of that technique died centuries ago, which should make it impossible for Shorin to use it. Unaware of what Shorin is doing, Kuwabara rushes in to attack. Before he can reach him, Shorin finishes the chant, and in an instant, Kuwabara is reduced to something no bigger than an ant, so small that even a caterpillar looks massive by comparison. Shorin takes advantage of this and cruelly crushes Kuwabara with his fist. Yusuke shouts at Kuwabara to forfeit the match, but Shorin isn't finished having his fun. He snaps Kuwabara's arm like it's nothing, causing him to scream in agony. This sends Yusuke into a rage as Shorin laughs sadistically. Shorin moves to continue torturing Kuwabara, and Yusuke demands that Genkai stop the match. Genkai orders Shorin to stop, but not before Shorin crushes Kuwabara's ribs. Yusuke charges in to attack Shorin, who casually tosses Kuwabara aside like trash before returning him to his normal size. Yusuke and Botan rush to Kuwabara's side, terrified of what they'll find. Thankfully, he's alive. Before passing out from his injuries, Kuwabara tells Yusuke that he refuses to die just yet. Botan worries that he may never recover. As they tend to him, Shorin casually speaks to Genkai about her spirit wave technique, showing unsettling interest. He mockingly points out that his chanting spell isn't very efficient for killing large numbers of enemies like he's done before, but Genkai's technique could kill 100 people with a single, simple motion of energy. Fueled by rage, Yusuke, who was completely exhausted moments ago from his previous fights, suddenly releases an intense surge of spiritual power and attacks Shorin as the final match of Genkai's competition begins. Yusuke declares that he's going to avenge the 99 psychics Shorin murdered. For the first time, Shorin begins to tremble. Yusuke attacks him relentlessly, beating him down in pure anger. Shorin then leaps into the air and unleashes another special technique, the sickle and tornado. This attack creates a vacuum around the opponent, forcing air to violently escape through the cuts in their skin. As Yusuke presses forward, spinning rings of compressed air slice into him. Now unable to attack head-on without being shredded by the rotating cutters, Yusuke still refuses to stop. He leaps upward, passes directly through the eye of the tornado, and drives his arm straight through Shorin's neck, slamming him down with everything he has. It appears Shorin has been completely knocked out. Believing the fight is over, Yusuke thinks he's won, but Genkai immediately tells him it's not finished, going on to ask him if he really thought Rando would be defeated that easily. Suddenly, the ground begins to quake. Shorin's body starts tearing itself apart as his voice deepens and grows far more sinister, declaring that Yusuke and everyone else will soon be dead. From the destruction, a monstrous demonic form emerges. At last, Yusuke is forced to face the nightmare he's been hunting all along, the true form of Rando. Yusuke, once again clearly exhausted, comes face to face with Rando, who calmly wonders which of his many techniques he's stolen he should use on Yusuke first. Yusuke responds by unleashing a flurry of heavy punches, but none of them even faze Rando. Rando points out that Yusuke's attacks don't carry any spirit power at all, and if that's all he has left, this fight won't last very long. Settling on his opening move, Rando uses the life force thread technique, binding Yusuke completely and immobilizing him. He then spins Yusuke around like a toy, violently hurling him into the ground and smashing him against trees, clearly enjoying every second of it. Seeing this, Botan begs Genkai to step in and save Yusuke, warning her that if Rando wins, she'll be next. Genkai refuses, explaining that she's growing old and her power needs to be passed on, even if it ends up in the hands of someone evil, no matter how many people suffer as a result. Rando then hangs Yusuke over a lake and summons flesh-eating demon fish known as hate fish around him. He explains that he brought them from the depths of the spirit world and casually tosses another demon he summoned into the water as a demonstration. The creature is devoured within seconds. To make things even worse, Rando points at Yusuke and reveals that he's also learned Yusuke's strongest technique, the spirit gun. He fires a massive red blast that completely obliterates a tree behind Yusuke. Frozen in fear, Yusuke can only stare, and Rando takes sadistic pleasure in the terror on his face. Botan is stunned that Rando was able to learn the spirit gun after seeing it only once, while Genkai notes that Rando's version is several times more powerful than Yusuke's. She adds that if Rando truly acquires her abilities, he could surpass anything she ever achieved in her lifetime. Botan. Proud of the fear he's instilled and ready to end things, Rando fires the spirit gun again, shattering the branch Yusuke is hanging from and sending him plunging into the lake below. At this point, Yusuke seems ready to give up and accept death, until Kuwabara's soul emerges from his body and dives into the lake. A burst of light surrounds Yusuke, frightening the demon fish away. Kuwabara speaks to Yusuke through his spirit, motivating him in his own rough way to keep fighting. With that encouragement, Yusuke regains his strength, breaks free from his bindings, and releases a massive explosion of spirit energy that kills the demon fish, shocking even Rando. Rando tries to shoot Yusuke with his spirit gun while he's still in the water, but Yusuke suddenly appears behind him through a connecting swamp. Using everything he has left, Yusuke fires his spirit gun. Rando counters with his own, but Yusuke's blast overwhelms it and sends Rando flying into the lake. Yusuke collapses, completely drained, hoping that he finally defeated Rando. But Rando erupts from the lake in a rage, destroying it as he rises. Furious at being injured, Rando immediately attacks Yusuke, pummeling him with relentless blows. Realizing he's more damaged than he thought, Rando decides to finish Yusuke in the same way he nearly killed Kuwabara, by crushing him. As Rando begins chanting the dwarf invocation technique again, expecting to finish him off, something goes wrong. Instead of Yusuke shrinking, Rando starts getting smaller. Genkai explains that the technique has a flaw. If someone wisely covers their ears while the invocation is spoken, the spell backfires and shrinks the caster instead. What confuses Rando is that Yusuke didn't cover his ears. Yusuke then realizes that swamp algae had clogged his ears, accidentally saving his life. Rando tries to reverse the technique, but Yusuke crashes down with a massive elbow drop, knocking Rando unconscious and winning Genkai's tournament. As Botan gathers the unconscious Rando to take him back to Spirit World, Genkai heals Kuwabara. Yusuke celebrates, remembering the world battle match ticket Botan promised him. Genkai, however, tells him that since he won the competition, her power now has to be passed on to him. That means Yusuke will need to train with her for the next 6 months in order to inherit it. 6 months pass, and Yusuke finally returns after completing his intense training with Genkai. Keiko meets him when he gets back and treats him to ice cream to celebrate their reunion. Feeling relaxed for the first time in a while, Yusuke catches up with Kuwabara and asks how he's been doing since the fight with Rando. Kuwabara explains that thanks to Genkai's help, he was only bedridden for a single day after the battle and has actually gotten stronger since then. He jokingly suggests fighting Yusuke, but Yusuke laughs it off, saying that the power he gained from Genkai's training would make the fight way too easy for him. He adds that he'll probably be having nightmares for a while because the training was brutal. As he talks about everything he had to endure, he finishes by saying that it was all worth it since he learned a lot of new techniques. Keiko suddenly interrupts the conversation, still completely unaware that Yusuke is a spirit detective, and Yusuke quickly makes up an excuse by inviting her to go see a movie. Just as they're about to enter the theater, Yusuke senses something dangerous nearby. He immediately makes another excuse, telling Keiko that he and Kuwabara forgot something and will be right back, then leaves her behind. As the two walk away, Yusuke tells Kuwabara that they're being followed. A group of blue-skinned punks suddenly pulls out knives and attacks, but Yusuke instantly takes them all out by using a new technique he learned from Genkai called the Spirit Shotgun. The display completely shocks Kuwabara. Right after that, Kuwabara senses something strange and notices someone watching them from a short distance away. The two chase the figure down an alley, only for the stranger to be knocked out by Botan, much to Kuwabara's excitement. Botan explains that the stranger is actually a demon disguised as a human and was acting as a spy. She then begins explaining Yusuke's next mission. Botan tells them that the day before, Koenma received a letter from the 4 saint beasts, demanding that the spirit world allow them immediate access to the living world. She explains that the Saint Beasts are 4 of the most notorious criminals in spirit world history, who avoided capture long ago by sealing themselves inside a heavily booby-trapped fortress known as Maze Castle. Over time, a city filled with their followers formed at the base of the fortress, populated by demons who worship the Saint Beasts like gods. Botan then explains that the punks who attacked Yusuke and Kuwabara were possessed by insects known as Makai, creatures that manipulate the minds of their hosts and drive them to commit evil acts. Ordinary humans can't see these insects, and they're being controlled by a whistle used by the Saint Beasts. By releasing these insects into the human world and spreading chaos, the Saint Beasts hope to force the spirit world into letting them cross over as a form of twisted negotiation. The spirit world currently has them trapped behind a barrier. Instead of giving in, Botan explains that Koenma will create a breach in the barrier, allowing Yusuke to enter the Saint Beast's territory and defeat them directly. If Yusuke fails, the insects will be the least of their worries. Yusuke complains that Koenma expects him to take down an entire city of demons by himself, but Kuwabara immediately volunteers to help. He heard the entire explanation and points out that his spirit awareness is even sharper than Yusuke's. He also reminds Yusuke that he now has the spirit sword, making him an essential ally. Botan then leads them to a secret tunnel that connects the human world to the Saint Beast's castle. Without hesitation, Kuwabara jumps straight in, forcing Yusuke to follow. Before Yusuke goes, Botan hands him a communicator that will allow them to stay in contact between the two worlds. At that moment, Yusuke suddenly remembers that he left Keiko alone in the movie theater. As the scene cuts to a very annoyed Keiko, Yusuke dives into the tunnel as fast as he can, leaving Botan behind to explain everything to her. Not long after, Yusuke and Kuwabara arrive at Mei's castle, only to be immediately surrounded by hundreds of demons. Completely outnumbered, the two struggle to hold their own until a strange light suddenly scares the monsters away. Two familiar figures then appear, Kurama and Hiei. They've come to help Yusuke on Koenma's orders. Koenma apparently knew from the start that the mission would require more than just Yusuke, and he promised Kurama and Hiei that their past crimes would be erased from spirit world records if they helped. Yusuke introduces Kuwabara to the two, but Hiei makes it clear that he doesn't consider this helping, just babysitting. Kuwabara tries to swing at Hiei in a comedic attempt and misses, prompting Hiei to tell Yusuke that once all of this is over, he still plans to get revenge on him for their first fight. The four warriors then enter Mei's castle together, only to be immediately confronted by a floating eyeball monster. The creature pulls a lever, and the ceiling suddenly begins to descend, trapping all four of them beneath it. The monster explains that the ceiling is designed to adapt to the strength of its victims, but there's a cruel twist. It allows just enough space for only one person to escape, meaning the other three will be crushed. Only a traitor will be able to move forward. With that revelation, the four warriors are left in a desperate situation, forced to think quickly about what to do next. As the flying monster continues to mock their situation, Kuwabara urges everyone to stay together no matter what happens. Yusuke spots the lever that was pulled earlier and tells Hiei that since he's the fastest out of all of them, he should be the one to dash out and pull the switch. Kuwabara immediately objects, saying Hiei can't be trusted, and Hiei agrees with him, reminding Yusuke that he already said he plans to get revenge on him eventually. Yusuke, however, doesn't believe Hiei will betray them here. He decides to trust him to make the right call, and says he'll release his spirit energy to buy time while Hiei makes a run for the lever. Hiei takes off at full speed, leaving only seconds before the ceiling is set to crush everyone. He reaches the lever but suddenly hesitates, which shocks Kuwabara. The flying demon takes advantage of the moment and tempts Hiei, telling him to abandon his new allies and join him in conquering the human world alongside the four Saint Beasts. To everyone's surprise, Hiei appears to accept the offer as the ceiling continues to descend, now just moments away from crushing Yusuke and the others. But in a moment of arrogance, the flying monster lets it slip that the lever was booby-trapped anyway, exactly the information Hiei was waiting for. In an instant, Hiei leaps forward, slashes the demon with his sword, and pulls the lever upward. He had pretended to be tempted so he could learn about the trap. A massive boulder drops from above, but Hiei effortlessly dodges it with his speed, telling the flying monster to inform his masters that they're coming for them. Yusuke tells Hiei that he knew he could trust him and praises the plan, but Hiei brushes it off, saying he only saved them because he might need their help later before walking ahead. Kurama comments to Yusuke that this is just Hiei's way of saying, "You're welcome." The group continues deeper into the castle when Yusuke's communicator suddenly activates. Botan checks in and tells him that things on Earth are mostly under control for now. She adds that she's only managed to capture 15 Makai insects so far, even though nearly a full day has passed, and vows to keep searching for other humans who may still be infected. As they move on, Yusuke asks Kurama what he knows about the four Saint Beasts, since Botan never really gave them a proper breakdown. Kurama explains that even Botan likely wouldn't know much, because after the barrier was erected around the city, the spirit world gradually seemingly forgot about it altogether. Their conversation is cut short when they hear a voice echoing in the distance, prompting them to enter a dark room. Suddenly, someone creeps in, and a rock demon appears right in front of them. He introduces himself as Genbu, one of the 4 Saint Beasts. He challenges them and swears to crush them all to pieces, but Kurama steps forward and insists on fighting alone, pointing out that it wouldn't be smart for everyone to attack at once. Yusuke is concerned, but Hiei tells him he's underestimating Kurama's strength. Hiei explains that he chose Kurama as his partner in the past, specifically to avoid having to fight him himself. He tells Yusuke that Kurama is extremely precise in battle and encourages everyone to watch closely. Without warning, Genbu launches a surprise attack on Kurama from behind, revealing that he can hide portions of his rocky body beneath the ground. Genbu explains that he can merge with any kind of rock, but Kurama calmly responds that he won't be caught off guard again. Genbu sinks into the ground, vanishes, and repeatedly reappears behind Kurama to strike, but Kurama manages to evade each attack. Eventually, Genbu disappears again, intent on landing a surprise blow. Kurama then pulls out a rose, surprising both Yusuke and Kuwabara. The rose suddenly transforms into a whip. From the shadows, Genbu mocks Kurama, calling the weapon useless. But when Genbu attacks again, Kurama lashes out with the whip and slices Genbu into pieces. Kurama explains that he was able to predict Genbu's position because of his scent. The aroma from the whip made Genbu's smell easy to track. Believing the fight is over, Kurama and the others relax, but Genbu's scattered body parts begin pulling themselves back together, reforming his body. Genbu launches another attack, hurling his body at Kurama in the form of a raging rock storm. Kurama counters by shattering him into even smaller pieces with the whip, but those fragments begin to reassemble as well. When Genbu attacks again with a storm of flying rock parts, Kurama notices a single piece that's colored red and stands out from the rest. Deciding to go for it, Kurama places himself directly in the path of the attack, taking cuts from the flying rock fragments as they strike him. Kurama collapses, and Genbu begins reforming once more to deliver the final blow. But something goes wrong. His body doesn't reassemble properly this time. Kurama explains that he discovered Genbu's source of power, the strange-looking rock he had grabbed earlier. He tosses it into the air and shreds it with his rose whip, causing Genbu to completely disintegrate. Although Genbu is defeated, Kurama is injured from the fight. Hiei comments that defeating the remaining Saint Beasts will be harder without Kurama at full strength. With Genbu taken down, Yusuke and the others continue deeper into the castle. Kurama begins to recover from his injuries, but Hiei immediately points out that he's in no shape to keep fighting. He says that leaves them with only 3 fighters and bluntly calls one of them useless, clearly referring to Kuwabara. In response, Kuwabara proves just how much stronger he's become since Yusuke started training with Genkai. He summons his spirit sword, now noticeably more powerful than before, which even surprises Koenma as he watches from the spirit world. Kuwabara then shows that he can now extend the spirit sword's length, though he collapses afterward, explaining that since the technique is still new, using it sometimes makes him dizzy. Suddenly, Botan contacts Yusuke again through the communicator, warning him that things on Earth have gotten worse. She believes the Saint Beasts have released another wave of insects into the human world. As she tries to explain further, she's chased by another possessed human. Botan manages to knock him out, but urgently tells Yusuke to hurry before the entire city is completely taken over. At that moment, the castle around Yusuke and the others begins to shake and crumble as a terrifying roar echoes through the structure. Kurama identifies the source as the next Saint Beast, and everyone rushes out into a clearing just as part of the castle behind them collapses. There, they encounter the second of the 4 Saint Beasts, Byakuo, a massive, muscular, and intimidating tiger demon. Hiei immediately offers to take him on, but Kuwabara shouts that he'll fight next instead. Byakuo warns them not to get cocky just because they defeated Genbu, calling him weak and claiming the other Saint Beasts would have killed him long ago if not for his ability to communicate with the demons in the city. Byakuo also makes it clear that he's bloodthirsty, having gone years without a proper hunt. His roar alone causes more of the castle to crumble as Kuwabara steps forward. Byakuo laughs, dismissing Kuwabara as nothing more than a weakling. Mocking him, Byakuo plucks a few strands of fur from his mane and breathes life into them, creating 4 small tiger-like demons. They immediately leap at Kuwabara, forcing him to draw his spirit sword. Kuwabara tries to strike the creatures down, but they're far too fast. As all four attack him at once, Kuwabara quickly becomes overwhelmed. Yusuke begs him to back out and let him take over, but Kuwabara refuses, angrily declaring that he'll turn his sword on Yusuke if he treats him like he's helpless. Yusuke points out that there's no way Kuwabara can win by simply swinging his sword around. Right then, Kuwabara comes up with a plan. He runs back toward his teammates as Byakko laughs, assuming Kuwabara is retreating. The four mini tigers chase him in a straight line, but this is exactly what Kuwabara wanted. When the tigers line up directly in front of him, he extends his spirit sword and impales all four of them in a single, straight thrust. Even so, the tigers are still powered by Byakko and continue chasing Kuwabara toward Yusuke and the others, still skewered on the blade. This time, Kuwabara starts running in circles, using the sword's energy to trap the four tigers completely, leaving them immobilized for good. With the smaller threats dealt with, Kuwabara turns to face an enraged Byakko, who finally prepares to fight personally. Byakko tells Kuwabara that no matter how impressive his spirit sword is, it won't be enough to defeat him. Kuwabara repeatedly slashes Byakko with his sword, but the attacks don't seem to affect the demon at all. Kurama and Hiei quickly notice something is wrong. Even though Byakko is being struck, Kuwabara is the only one taking damage. To everyone's shock, Byakko begins growing even larger. Kurama realizes what's happening. Byakko is absorbing the energy Kuwabara releases with each spirit sword attack. As Byakko grows stronger, Kuwabara's energy steadily drains away. His spirit sword begins to shrink as his power fades. Still stubborn as ever, Kuwabara refuses to give up. Drawing on what little strength he has left, he summons his spirit sword one more time and charges forward again, launching another attack at Byakko. Kuwabara manages to force his spirit sword straight into Byakko's mouth, but once again, Byakko absorbs the energy, nearly knocking Kuwabara unconscious. With whatever strength he has left, Kuwabara releases another smaller spirit sword, but Byakko easily kicks him away. Byakko knocks him back again and mocks him, but this time, Kuwabara notices something important. Inside Byakko, the absorbed energy looks like it's struggling to stay contained. Realizing this, Kuwabara comes up with another plan. When Byakko charges in to deliver the finishing blow, Kuwabara summons his spirit sword again with renewed effort to block the attack. This time, he pours even more power into it and stabs Byakko in the stomach. The sword fades away as Kuwabara collapses to the ground. Unable to eat him because he's already too full of energy, Byakko tries to crush Kuwabara beneath his feet. Suddenly, he senses that something is wrong. Kuwabara's plan has finally worked. Byakko has absorbed more energy than his body can handle, and as a result, he violently explodes, falling down into the pit below to his apparent demise. The blast restores Kuwabara's spirit energy, though he's still tired from the fight. With two demons defeated, Yusuke and the others continue onward. Botan contacts Yusuke again through the communicator to check on their progress with the Saint Beasts. She reports that things on Earth are getting worse, as more and more humans are being taken over by the demon insects. As soon as the call ends, Yusuke and the others hear the same terrifying roar they heard before. Byakko is still alive. They scramble to escape before the ground beneath them collapses from his roar. Byakko invites them to continue the battle in his lair, and Kuwabara accepts the challenge. They enter the next area, a massive, lava-filled valley known as the Room of Hell. Hundreds of stepping stones stretch across the space, but beneath them is a sea of molten lava. Kuwabara tears off a piece of his shirt and tosses it down, only for it to burn up before it even reaches the lava, proving just how intense the heat is. From a distance, Byakko appears again, having survived the fall and regained his composure. He challenges them to another showdown. Yusuke offers to fight this time, but Kuwabara stops him, saying this is his fight and that he has to finish what he started. Hiei tries to talk Kuwabara out of it, pointing that he's already done more than enough and should rest, but Kuwabara explains his code of honor. No matter how ugly a fight gets, he won't back down, even if it means risking his life. With resolve, Kuwabara leaps forward to face Byakko one last time, but the stone he lands on suddenly crumbles. He barely manages to catch himself, hanging on just before plunging into the lava below. Regaining his footing, he removes his shirt, prepares himself, and summons his spirit sword once again. Byakuo responds by unleashing a powerful shockwave at him. Kuwabara instinctively prepares to knock it back with his sword, but Kurama shouts for him to dodge it instead. Kuwabara listens and quickly realizes why. The shockwave disintegrates anything it touches. Hiei adds that if Kuwabara's spirit sword were to make contact with it, the resulting chain reaction would destroy his spirit entirely. Now understanding the danger, Kuwabara dodges each shockwave as Byakuo fires them, destroying stepping stones one after another. Eventually, only 2 stones remain, one beneath Byakuo and one beneath a stunned Kuwabara. Kurama asks Hiei if he can reach Kuwabara, and Hiei says he can, but Kuwabara tells them all to stay back and let him finish this himself. When Byakuo launches his final shockwave, Kuwabara jumps off his stone and drops downward, shocking everyone. In midair, Kuwabara reveals a new technique. His spirit sword transforms into a pole-like weapon, allowing him to bounce off one of the broken platforms and launch himself back upward toward Byakuo. Using that momentum, Kuwabara delivers a powerful punch straight to Byakuo's jaw, knocking him off his stone and into the lava below. The force of the punch sends Kuwabara falling as well. Yusuke and the others are horrified, believing Kuwabara sacrificed himself to defeat Byakuo. Suddenly, they hear Kuwabara screaming. He didn't fall after all. He's dangling just below the stone and yelling for help. The group jokes about leaving him behind, and with 2 of the 4 Saint Beasts defeated, they move on to face the remaining demons. The group soon comes across a room lined with 15 different doors. Kurama warns everyone to be careful, explaining that only one of the doors leads to the correct path. There won't be a second chance to choose again, and the wrong doors are rigged with unavoidable traps. If they pick the wrong one, they'll all die. Since Kuwabara has the strongest spiritual awareness out of everyone, Yusuke asks him to choose which door they should take. Kuwabara selects a door on the left, saying he senses something big behind it. When he opens the door, he jumps back in fear after seeing a tiny mouse on the other side. Despite the scare, it turns out to be the correct door, and the group continues forward. Unbeknownst to them, the 2 remaining Saint Beasts are watching, and one of them decides to confront the group next. Yusuke and the others eventually stop in front of a big blue door, flanked by dragon statues on both sides. Based on the statues and the strange odor in the air, Kurama confirms that the next Saint Beast they'll be facing is the blue dragon. Suddenly, the door opens on its own, and they step into a room filled with thick fog made entirely of spirit energy. The next Saint Beast appears and introduces himself as Seiryu, the blue dragon. Almost immediately, Seiryu announces that they have another guest. From the door behind them, Byakuo enters the room, still alive after falling into the sea of lava earlier. He begs Seiryu for help so that together they can fight the others. Seiryu ignores him completely and freezes Byakuo solid using his ice technique. He then shatters Byakuo's frozen body into pieces. Yusuke angrily asks how Seiryu could kill his own ally, but Seiryu coldly responds by insulting Byakuo, saying he was nothing more than a weapon to him, even spitting on his face. Before Byakuo dies, a tear forms in his eye. The sight fuels Yusuke's anger towards Seiryu, but Hiei stops him and tells him to save that anger for their leader. He insists on fighting Seiryu himself. Hiei steps forward and tosses his cloak over Byakuo's head. Seiryu laughs, finding it amusing that Hiei seems to feel sympathy for Byakuo. Kurama then explains to Yusuke that he's seen Hiei act with similar cruelty in the past, but something about Byakuo's death clearly angered him. Kurama adds that he's never seen Hiei begin a fight with such an extraordinary surge of spirit energy before. Before the battle starts, Seiryu tries to recruit Hiei, offering him a place among the Saint Beasts. Hiei, of course, refuses outright. Seiryu attacks first, but Hiei draws his sword and blocks the strike with a barrier formed from his spirit energy. Seiryu continues launching ice-based attacks, freezing the room as Hiei dodges them with his incredible speed. Eventually, one of Seiryu's attacks manages to freeze Hiei's left leg, limiting his movement. Seiryu mocks him and tells Hiei to beg for mercy as he prepares another attack. Before that attack can land, Hiei drives his sword into the ground and launches himself directly at Seiryu. As they clash, Hiei's right leg and left arm become frozen, while Seiryu appears to have the upper hand and remains seemingly unharmed. Suddenly, Hiei laughs. He proves that Seryu's ice technique had no real effect on him, effortlessly shattering the frozen restraints on his body. Shocked, Seryu feels blood trickling down from his head. As more hidden cuts begin to appear all over his body, he explodes in a burst of energy, meeting a painful end. Kuwabara asks when Hiei even managed to attack Seryu, but Kurama tells him not to feel bad, admitting that he couldn't see it either after the initial strike. The ice covering the room slowly melts away, and Hiei calmly sheaths his sword. When the others finally reach him, Kurama asks how many times he struck Seryu. Hiei replies that he cut him 16 times. Yusuke admits that he only saw 7 or 8 of them, and jokes that if Hiei were to use those moves the next time they fight, he's completely screwed. Hiei turns his back and responds with a simple maybe, which surprises Yusuke. Kurama explains that Hiei is going through a complicated change, and that it seems he's starting to view Yusuke as a friend. Only one of the Saint Beasts remain, Suzaku, who appears to be the leader of the group. Suzaku's pet, Murugu, returns with information about Yusuke. After learning one of Yusuke's weaknesses, Suzaku plays the Makai whistle, redirecting the attention of the insect-possessed humans toward Keiko. Back on Earth, Botan, already struggling to deal with the possessed people, notices their sudden shift in behavior and decides to follow them. At school, Keiko is putting up flyers when one of the insects infects Mr. Iwamoto. He attacks Keiko, but she manages to escape. As she runs, more insect-controlled humans confront her, forcing her to run for her life. Back in Mei's castle, Kuwabara suddenly senses something wrong and tells the group that something terrible is happening in the human world. As they continue toward the final Saint Beast, Yusuke can only hope that Keiko is still safe. The group charges deeper into the castle, finally reaching the last chamber where Suzaku is waiting for them. What they don't know is that Suzaku's master plan is already underway, and that plan is to kill Keiko. Back in the human world, Keiko is still running for her life. She gets cornered, and suddenly someone pulls her into a patch of bushes. It turns out to be Botan. Botan contacts Yusuke and explains what's happening, telling him about Suzaku's plan to have Keiko killed. Their conversation is cut short when more possessed people close in, forcing Botan and Keiko to run again toward an exit together. Meanwhile, Yusuke and the others continue forward, unaware that Suzaku is watching them the entire time. He enjoys seeing the panic on their faces after learning about Keiko, and tells Murugu that they'll need a distraction to keep the group busy a little longer. Almost immediately, Yusuke and the others are surrounded by hundreds of zombies. Yusuke wants to blast straight through them to save time, but Kurama warns him not to waste his spirit energy before facing the final Saint Beast. That's when Hiei comes up with a plan. Working together, Kuwabara, Kurama, and Hiei form a makeshift bridge, allowing Yusuke to leap into a nearby entrance leading directly to the final chamber. They pull it off successfully, and Yusuke runs ahead alone to confront Suzaku, while the other 3 stay behind to hold off the zombies. Yusuke races up the final flight of stairs and enters the chamber, where he sees a massive screen showing Botan and Keiko being chased by possessed humans. Standing beneath the screen is Suzaku, the leader of the Saint Beasts, calmly playing the mind-controlling whistle. As Suzaku continues mocking a terrified Keiko, Yusuke snaps. Enraged, he charges in, trying to take the whistle by force and launching a relentless barrage of punches. Suzaku blocks every single strike with just one hand, all while continuing to hold the whistle in the other. When Suzaku leaps into the air, Yusuke decides to try and end the fight quickly and fires a powerful spirit gun, but Suzaku is ready for it. He effortlessly deflects the blast, destroying part of the chamber in the process. Yusuke is stunned by Suzaku's strength, wondering how, even after 6 months of brutal training with Genkai, Suzaku was able to brush aside his spirit gun so easily. Suzaku then goes on the offensive. He raises his hand, and a bolt of lightning crashes down onto him, shocking Yusuke. Suzaku reveals his technique, the Storm of Torment, an almost unavoidable attack that traps its target with overwhelming agony. He swings an enormous lightning-charged fist at Yusuke. Yusuke manages to dodge the direct hit, but the sheer force of the attack still engulfs him in a wave of unbearable pain. Yusuke screams and collapses instantly, a sight that even shocks Koenma as he watches from the spirit world. As Yusuke struggles to recover, Suzaku and Marugu mock him. Suzaku notes that Yusuke is the only human who has ever survived the storm of torment, and tells Yusuke to stay down and watch Keiko die on Earth. Instead, Yusuke does something unexpected. He takes off his shoes, slides them over his fists, and braces himself for another lightning strike. Marugu laughs at the idea, mocking Yusuke's plan, while Suzaku prepares to unleash the storm of torment again. At the same time, back in the human world, Botan and Keiko are cornered by the possessed humans chasing them. Realizing they have no choice, the two decide to fight back. Keiko acts as a distraction while Botan grabs a fire extinguisher and sprays the attackers. As Suzaku attacks again, Yusuke uses his shoes to insulate himself from the lightning, but they're quickly destroyed. What Suzaku doesn't realize is that Yusuke has been using his spirit energy beneath them as an additional shield. Meanwhile, Botan is grabbed by a possessed Iwamoto, but Keiko rushes in and saves her by slapping him hard. Back in the chamber, Yusuke seizes the moment and drives a powerful right hook straight into Suzaku, catching him completely off guard. Yusuke rushes back in, but Suzaku continues to block every one of his attacks, calmly pointing out that Yusuke's power is clearly increasing. Yusuke manages to slip through and knock the whistle out of Suzaku's hand, but before he can grab it himself, Suzaku uses his superior speed to knock Yusuke away and reclaim the whistle. Yusuke doesn't give him a second to breathe and immediately charges again, slamming Suzaku hard into a wall. Suzaku manages to break free though using his lightning abilities, still holding on to the whistle. Yusuke prepares to rush in once more, but then he notices Botan and Keiko still being chased on the massive screen, which makes him hesitate. Suzaku mocks him, though he admits that it's becoming difficult to kill Yusuke while also having to worry about protecting the whistle. That's when Suzaku decides it's time to reveal another technique. Back on Earth, Botan and Keiko keep running from the possessed humans chasing them, forced to think fast when they get cornered. Meanwhile, Suzaku splits himself into 6 additional copies, creating a total of 7 Suzaku. He introduces this ability as the Prism of 7, explaining that each one isn't just an illusion or shadow, but a real Suzaku with its own will, allowing them to unleash devastating combination attacks. All 7 Suzaku leap into the air and fire off a lightning arrow attack known as the Prism Storm of Torment. Yusuke manages to dodge or deflect every blast except one, which violently pierces his shoulder and slams him to the ground. Suzaku now has the advantage, but Yusuke refuses to give up. Suzaku knocks him down again and has the other Suzaku grab him, torturing him with lightning. They carefully control the pain, giving him just enough to keep him conscious so he can watch Keiko die. On the screen, Yusuke sees the possessed humans finally break through the door where Botan and Keiko were hiding. Believing this is the end, Keiko and Botan retreat into a locker inside the room. Keiko's handkerchief gets caught in the door, and the possessed people spot it. Without hesitation, they smash the locker open. Seeing this, Yusuke believes Botan and Keiko have been killed. He breaks down, losing all hope. The 7 Suzaku intensify their attacks, electrocuting him repeatedly and slowly, dragging out his death. Yusuke screams in agony, and back in the spirit world, Koenma fears the worst, believing that if Yusuke dies, all hope for Earth will be lost. At the same time, Kuwabara, Kurama, and Hiei continue fighting off waves of zombies, but they're completely overwhelmed as more and more keep appearing. Kuwabara tries to use his spirit sword to leap up to the entrance Yusuke went through earlier, but falls short and slams face first into a stone wall. Hiei and Kurama manage to clear a path through the lower entrance, and everyone rushes inside. It isn't long before they run into another massive group of zombies and are forced to fight their way through once again. Back in the chamber, Yusuke is still being tortured and is on the verge of giving up completely when Genkai's voice suddenly echoes in his mind, telling him that Botan and Keiko aren't dead. Right after that, Botan and Keiko emerge from hiding. They had tricked the possessed humans into thinking they were inside the locker by deliberately placing the handkerchief there, allowing them to escape once more. This surprises both Suzaku and Yusuke. Realizing that Botan and Keiko are still alive, Yusuke regains his composure, which immediately irritates Suzaku. In response, Suzaku increases the intensity of Yusuke's torture. Genkai's voice returns, urging Yusuke to remember his training. Yusuke flashes back to his time with Genkai, where she scolds him for always putting only half his effort into everything he's ever done. She tells him to commit to something fully for once, with all his heart and energy, instead of holding himself back out of fear that it might not work. She tells him to focus on what truly matters and give himself to it completely. Yusuke thinks about his family, his friends, and how hard everyone has fought to get him to this point. He realizes how much everyone is counting on him to be strong for the sake of the earth. As Suzaku prepares his finishing blow, Yusuke begins to pour everything he has into his spirit energy. At the exact moment Suzaku strikes, Yusuke releases a massive blast that nearly destroys the entire chamber, leaving Suzaku completely stunned. With Yusuke now far stronger than before, the real battle is finally about to begin. Suzaku tries to fire off another lightning attack alongside his remaining clones, but he can't. He's already burned through most of his energy torturing Yusuke. Yusuke, on the other hand, fires off his spirit shotgun, blasting all of the Suzaku at once and knocking them down. Right after that, Yusuke collapses as well, still badly injured and having completely exhausted the last of his spirit energy. Back in the human world, Botan and Keiko are still running from the possessed people chasing them when Botan suddenly gets hit hard by a surprise attack and is knocked unconscious. Keiko rushes to help her, but now they're cornered with nowhere left to run. Yusuke sees all of this happening on Suzaku's screen and recognizes that destroying the whistle is the only way to stop everything. With barely any strength left, he crawls toward it, but before he can reach it, Suzaku's bird Murugu swoops in and kicks the whistle away. Yusuke threatens her with a spirit gun, warning that if she touches the whistle again, he'll shoot and kill her. From the spirit world though, Koenma points out that Yusuke has already used up all of his spirit energy and is bluffing. Even so, the bluff works, and Murugu panics and flees. Before Yusuke can grab the whistle and destroy it, the original Suzaku steps down hard on Yusuke's hand. He thanks Murugu for buying him time and calls out Yusuke's bluff, noting that if Yusuke truly had enough energy left to fire the spirit gun, he would have used it to destroy the whistle. Despite being weakened himself, Suzaku absorbs the spirits of the fallen Suzaku clones he created earlier, restoring himself to full strength and putting Yusuke in serious danger. He then splits himself once again into 7 Suzaku, further stacking the odds against Yusuke. Suzaku explains that the only way to defeat him is to kill all 7 at the same time, but Yusuke is far too weak to do that. Suzaku begins charging up another Prism Storm of Torment, intending to finish Yusuke in a single devastating attack. When Suzaku releases the attack, it strikes Yusuke, but not directly. Suzaku is confused by this until he realizes that one of his red tentacles was shattered earlier by Yusuke's spirit gun. Those tentacles act as a guidance system for his attacks. Since he can no longer hit Yusuke cleanly, Suzaku decides instead to tear him apart slowly, piece by piece, until he dies. As Yusuke struggles to come up with a plan while barely able to move, he hears Keiko calling out to him through Suzaku's screen. Just as she's about to be killed, Yusuke's energy surges again, so powerfully that it forms a protective barrier around Keiko in the human world. As Yusuke forces himself back to his feet, Suzaku questions where all this energy is coming from. He then realizes the truth. Yusuke is burning his own life energy, separate from his spirit energy, a move that could kill him if he uses too much. As Yusuke charges forward, Suzaku fires another barrage of lightning arrows. Some of them strike Yusuke before he manages to unleash another spirit shotgun. At that exact moment, Kuwabara, Kurama, and Hiei finally reach Yusuke's location. They arrive just in time to see Yusuke blast all of the Suzaku head-on with overwhelming force. The explosion destroys the entire chamber, sending both Yusuke and Suzaku flying, killing Murugu and completely shattering the whistle. When the dust finally settles, all of the Suzaku lie motionless, and so does Yusuke. Back on Earth, the possessed humans suddenly collapse, unconscious but restored to normal. Keiko, Botan, and the entire human world are finally safe. Before dying, Suzaku speaks to Yusuke, who is still unconscious, admitting that he now understands why he lost. Yusuke's strength comes from his feelings. After acknowledging this and giving Yusuke his respect, Suzaku finally dies. In the spirit world, Koenma celebrates the victory, but Yusuke is completely drained. Both his spirit energy and his life energy are nearly gone. Kurama checks on him and notices his heart beating more and more slowly, to the point where it looks like it might stop. Realizing his friend is about to die, Kuwabara decides to transfer his own energy to Yusuke to keep him alive. Hiei watches in silence, confused at first, but slowly beginning to understand the sacrifice Yusuke made to save the earth. After giving all the energy he can, Kuwabara collapses on top of Yusuke and passes out. 3 days later, Yusuke wakes up in Kuwabara's room in the human world and sees Kuwabara and Kurama nearby, realizing that he really did defeat Suzaku. Suddenly remembering Keiko and Botan, he panics and asks if they're okay. Kuwabara and Kurama exchange somber looks, making Yusuke think something terrible happened. Then, Keiko and Botan burst into the room, completely safe. Kuwabara laughs hard. He convinced Kurama to play along just to mess with Yusuke. Later, as Keiko leaves, Yusuke follows her and apologizes for everything, fully expecting her to slap him. Instead, she points her finger at him and tells him that Botan filled her in on everything he's gone through as a detective. She says she'll only forgive him if he promises to tell her the next time he goes off on a case, so she doesn't have to worry. Yusuke explains that he kept it from her because he wanted to protect her. As they walk away together, he still hasn't actually promised to keep her in the loop. Some time goes by, and Yusuke has already slipped back into his usual habit of cutting class. One early morning, he's running to school like normal when he suddenly gets the feeling that someone is following him. It doesn't take long for him to realize that it's Hiei. Without much explanation, Hiei hands Yusuke a videotape from Koenma, noticeably quieter than usual, and then disappears just as quickly as he showed up. The tape contains Yusuke's next mission. Later that day at school, Yusuke asks Kuwabara if they can watch the tape over at his place. Kuwabara, however, admits that he actually dreamed Yusuke would bring up another mission, and he's not exactly thrilled about risking his life again by getting dragged into yet another one. Keiko shows up and immediately scolds Yusuke for bringing a videotape to school. Yusuke is about to brush it off and hide the truth, but then he remembers the promise Keiko wanted him to keep. He explains that the tape probably contains his next case, though the issue is that Keiko still doesn't know what his job as a spirit detective really involves. Instead of knowing he's fighting demons and risking his life, she believes his cases are just part of some kind of after-school program or something along those lines. Later on, Yusuke confronts Botan about this, asking why she didn't properly explain what he actually does instead of lying and keeping Keiko in the dark. Botan explains that one of the basic rules of the spirit world is that things won't function properly if normal humans have solid proof of the supernatural. Because of that, she could only tell Keiko just enough to explain Yusuke's frequent disappearances, but nothing more. Their conversation gets cut off when Kuwabara sets up his VCR to play the tape, warning them to keep it down so they don't bother his sister. When the tape starts, Koenma appears on screen, shocking Kuwabara since he looks exactly like a toddler. Koenma explains that there's no need to worry about anyone else seeing the message, because to people without heightened spirit awareness, the tape will only appear as static and white noise, right as Kuwabara's sister walks into the room without anyone noticing. Koenma then explains Yusuke's next assignment, a search and rescue mission. Yusuke is tasked with rescuing a girl named Yukina, an ice apparition who's being held captive by a greedy old businessman named Gonzo Tarukane. Tarukane is keeping her imprisoned in a mountain stronghold about 200 miles from the city, a criminal base where humans have formed alliances with powerful demons. Yukina has the rare ability to produce valuable pearls from her tears, pearls worth millions, which is why Tarukane has been forcing her to cry so his business can thrive. When Yukina's face appears on screen so everyone can memorize it, Kuwabara, despite earlier saying he didn't want to risk his life again, instantly falls for her and becomes completely fired up to help. At the same time, everyone realizes that Kuwabara's sister, Shizuru, has seen the entire tape, since spiritual awareness runs in their family. Kuwabara immediately asks her for money for bus fare to prepare for the mission and rushes out of the room, ready to go. Meanwhile, over at Tarukane's mansion, Tarukane steps off a helicopter and demands an update from his servants about Yukina's tears. When they tell him they haven't been able to make her cry, Tarukane explains that he's brought in specialists who can help. The Toguro Brothers. They're leaders of an apparition gang that captures, sells, and even tortures demons. Soon after, Yukina is shown locked away, quietly admiring the birds flying through the forest while mourning the freedom she's lost. Sensing Tarukane and his guests approaching, she uses her ice powers to freeze the area around them, though it doesn't stop them from coming closer. The Toguro Brothers arrive at Yukina's chamber, and the taller of the two attempts to hurt her to force her to cry. Just as Tarukane has learned before, it doesn't work. Yukina has been imprisoned long enough that she's hardened her heart against the pain and refuses to shed tears. However, when the animals she was admiring earlier fly past, the Toguro brothers realize her weakness. The shorter and elder Toguro grabs the birds and kills them, finally breaking Yukina's composure. She begins to cry, and her tears transform into pearls, much to Tarukane's delight. Before leaving, the taller and younger Toguro cruelly tells Yukina to give up hope and practice crying, twisting the knife even deeper. Later on, Yusuke, Kuwabara, and Botan begin their journey to the mountains to rescue Yukina, with Kuwabara leading the way, still completely in love after seeing her. Unbeknownst to them, a nearby statue is watching their movements. Tarukane realizes that someone is entering his territory and orders his men to kill the intruders, though the Toguro brothers ask for a favor. They want to let one of their demons deal with the trespassers instead. As they travel, Kuwabara keeps pushing everyone to hurry so he can meet Yukina as soon as possible. Botan and Yusuke quietly wonder if they should tell him about the rest of Koenma's message that played after Kuwabara left the room. Apparently, Kuwabara missed the part where Koenma revealed that Yukina is actually Hiei's sister, and at the same time, Hiei is already making his own way toward her to rescue her. Back with Yusuke's group, Kuwabara suddenly senses something weird. Botan's demon compass starts going wild, and the group encounters Hiryu, a demon who initially appears human, but then transforms into a tentacled creature. Hiryu is a bodyguard ordered to kill anyone who tries to rescue Yukina. Yusuke and Kuwabara question why a demon like Hiryu would allow one of his own kind to be tortured. But Hiryu replies that just as some humans will sell their souls for power, there are demons willing to do the same. Yusuke and Kuwabara scold him for it, and Hiryu lunges forward, ready to kill them both. The fight doesn't last long. Kuwabara slices Hiryu with his spirit sword, and Yusuke finishes him off with a blast from his spirit gun. With the demon defeated, the group presses on toward Tarukane's mansion, prepared to face whatever challenges he sends their way. Tarukane is informed that the monster he sent out was defeated by the outsiders, and the Toguro brothers immediately realize that these intruders are far from ordinary. Tarukane starts to worry, but Toguro calmly reassures him that there's no reason to panic. Still uneasy, Tarukane decides to ease his nerves by taking the Toguro brothers down to an underground cell filled with demons. There, he sets up a test to see what the younger Toguro is really capable of by pitting him against one of Tarukane's strongest pet demons. It quickly becomes clear just how powerful Toguro truly is. Using only about 30% of his full strength, he punches straight through the demon's body in a single blow, killing it instantly. Tarukane is stunned by what he sees and finally starts to feel confident. That's when he comes up with a more entertaining idea: a gambling game. Meanwhile, Yusuke, Kuwabara, and Botan continue moving toward their destination when Kuwabara suggests taking a detour, sensing something bad ahead. Botan insists they stay on the main path, but she suddenly trips on a web. The web snags her ankle and yanks her up into a massive spider web, where a spider demon plans to drink her blood. Kuwabara immediately jumps into action, slicing through the web with his spirit sword, and Yusuke rushes in to save Botan. The demon, clearly irritated, tries to fight back, but Yusuke channels his spirit energy into a punch that blasts straight through the demon, killing it on the spot. Back in the spirit world, Koenma and his assistant are watching Yusuke and the others as night falls in the human world. Kurama suddenly arrives and reports that Hiei hasn't been seen since he delivered the tape to Yusuke. Koenma assumes that Hiei already knows what was on the tape and has gone off on his own to rescue his sister. The assistant asks why this is such a problem, and Koenma explains that Hiei is hot-headed and likely to kill everyone at Tarukane's mansion. Since some of the people are human, that would be a serious crime. Demons are forbidden from taking human lives, no matter the circumstances. Kurama tries to reassure Koenma, saying that Hiei will probably just work alongside Yusuke to save Yukina, but Koenma isn't convinced. Soon after, Hiei is shown leaping through the trees at hyperspeed toward Tarukane's mansion, completely unnoticed by Yusuke and the others. That night, Hiei has a nightmare about the surgery where his Jagan eye was implanted. When he wakes up the next morning, shouting his sister's name, he disappears before anyone else realizes he was even there. Later on, Tarukane gathers several of his business associates from the Black Club, a secret society personally selected by him, known for their cruelty and influence within the criminal underworld. He announces the start of his gambling game, explaining that outsiders are attempting to invade his mansion and inviting bets on whether they'll live or die. Toguro informed Tarukane earlier that these intruders have already defeated powerful demons like Rando and Suzaku, prompting Tarukane to carefully manipulate the odds. His first wager pits 12 defenders against the outsiders. As expected, most of the club members bet on the defenders, but one man, Sakio, sides with the outsiders and even doubles the bet. Tarukane is shocked, and Sakio calmly explains that he's heard rumors about 2 boys who hunt demons, making the risk worth it in his eyes. Suddenly, Toguro notices that 6 of the 12 demons have already been killed simultaneously. This turns out to be the work of Kuwabara, who grows even more excited at the thought of rescuing Yukina. The remaining 6 demons move in, but Yusuke and Kuwabara take them down with ease. Tarukane is shaken, now worried that he might lose to Sakio. As they draw closer to the mansion and Yukina, Botan warns Yusuke not to let Kuwabara charge in recklessly, since her demon compass is picking up 3 extremely powerful demons. Botan offers to scout ahead and investigate, while Yusuke and Kuwabara, confident in their abilities, are eager to press forward. Tarukane then initiates his second bet, unleashing 3 of his strongest fighters from the apparition gang known as the Triad, Miyuki, Inmanki, and Goku Monki. Once again, everyone bets in favor of Tarukane's men. Everyone except Sakio. Once more, Sakio places his bet on Yusuke and even triples the wager, stunning everyone and infuriating Tarukane. In response, Tarukane resorts to a dirty trick. Explosions suddenly rip through the forest surrounding the mansion. It appears that Tarukane has activated a self-destruct mechanism, destroying the forest and seemingly wiping out the outsiders for good. However, Yusuke and Kuwabara emerge completely unharmed, finally arriving at the mansion in dramatic fashion as their spirit energy surges. Yusuke, Kuwabara, and Botan step inside the mansion and are immediately confronted with their first challenge, one of Tarukane's fighters, Miyuki. Miyuki steps forward and challenges them to a fight. Kuwabara hesitates, saying he refuses to fight women because it goes against his honor code, but Yusuke steps in front of him and accepts the challenge instead. Miyuki attacks, and Yusuke responds in kind, but when Miyuki lands, she suddenly calls Yusuke a pervert, leaving everyone confused. Yusuke tells her that she doesn't stand a chance in this fight, and in response, Miyuki pulls a strand of hair from her head that transforms into a rope. The rope wraps around Yusuke's neck and begins to strangle him as Miyuki shouts that he never would have done what he did if she were a man. Miyuki leaps upward and smashes through the ceiling, dragging Yusuke with her and leaving him hanging. Yusuke uses the situation to his advantage, swinging for momentum and crashing through the section of the ceiling next to her. He punches Miyuki in the chest and stomps her as the ceiling collapses, sending her crashing to the ground below. Miyuki rushes back in to attack again, but Yusuke knocks her down. Kuwabara yells at Yusuke to take it easy since she's a girl, but Miyuki keeps attacking anyway. Yusuke fires back with a powerful roundhouse kick that sends her smashing into a wall. Kuwabara gets upset over how rough Yusuke is being with a woman, even if she is an enemy, but Yusuke then reveals the truth. Miyuki is actually a man. During their close combat, Yusuke explains that he couldn't help but notice and checked a few times to be sure, and it became obvious once he got a clear look and feel. Miyuki becomes insecure and assumes Yusuke is treating him differently because he's a man, but Yusuke throws him into a wall and says his gender has nothing to do with it. He's here to save Yukina. With that, Miyuki passes out, defeated. Kuwabara, curious and unconvinced, tries to get a closer look to confirm Miyuki's gender, but Botan smacks him on the head for being a pervert. Meanwhile, Yukina remains imprisoned in her tower as Hiei draws closer to the mansion. He suddenly notices a light snowfall and thinks back to Yukina as a child, innocently playing with animals. Pushing forward with renewed focus, he continues toward the mansion to rescue her. Back inside Tarukane's mansion, Kuwabara suddenly shoves Yusuke and Botan out of the way, narrowly avoiding an incoming attack. The strike slices the band on Kuwabara's head clean in half. Another one of Tarukane's fighters has appeared, Inmaki. Using cloaking abilities, Inmaki vanishes and begins moving at super speed around Yusuke and Kuwabara, eventually slashing Yusuke across the back with his Wolverine-like claws. Unable to see him clearly, Yusuke tells everyone to retreat and runs into a narrow hallway nearby. When Inmaki catches up, Kuwabara gives Yusuke the signal, and Yusuke unleashes his spirit shotgun. The blast hits Inmaki head-on, knocking him out. The retreat was deliberate. They lured Inmaki into an ambush. Suddenly, Botan is grabbed by another monster, Gokumon Ki, the third member of the triad. He uses Botan as a human shield, preventing Yusuke from using his spirit gun, and launches an attack. Kuwabara tries to summon his spirit sword, but hesitates, afraid of hitting Botan, and holds back too much power. Gokumon Ki takes advantage of this and smashes Kuwabara aside with his mace. Yusuke tells Botan to raise her arms, and she slips out of the coat Gokumon Ki was holding, breaking free. With Botan safe, Yusuke and Kuwabara combine their spirit energy and kick Gokumon Ki into a wall with enough force to knock him out cold. Tarukane grows increasingly furious as Sakio wins another bet. Deciding to go all in, Tarukane announces his final wager, one he's confident he can't lose: the Toguro Brothers versus the Outsiders. Tarukane believes Toguro's strength will recover all the money he's lost in the previous bets, but Sakio responds by placing an outrageous wager of $66 trillion on the Outsiders. Tarukane accepts the risk, seals the deal, and orders his servants to move Yukina to the location where the battle will take place. As they move through the mansion, Kuwabara senses that Yukina is being relocated. Using telepathy, he contacts her, but she tells him to stay away, afraid that anyone who tries to rescue her will be killed. Kuwabara reassures her that they've already defeated Tarukane's men, but Yukina warns him that the worst of them is standing right in front of her. Despite this, Yusuke and the others rush toward her location. At the same time, Hiei finally reaches Tarukane's mansion and immediately senses an overwhelming power coming from inside. Not long after, Yusuke, Kuwabara, and Botan enter a battle room and come face to face with their next opponents, the Toguro Brothers. Kuwabara clearly underestimates how strong Toguro really is, but Yusuke stops him, saying he can feel something overwhelming coming from him, like something huge is standing right there in the room with them. As the fight begins, the elder Toguro reshapes his body into the form of a sword while the younger Toguro starts powering up. The sheer amount of power Toguro releases catches both Yusuke and Kuwabara off guard. Before they can react, Toguro charges at them, barely missing as he slices through their clothes in the process. Kuwabara pulls out his spirit sword, but Toguro is already right in front of him. Kuwabara manages to block the initial attack, but Toguro's strength is too much. He punches Kuwabara and sends him crashing into the wall. Kuwabara is lucky. He had stepped back just far enough to avoid being killed. Yusuke slips in from the side and fires his spirit gun, but Toguro leaps out of the way. Yusuke immediately follows up with his spirit shotgun, but Toguro activates a barrier that shields him from the blast. Thinking fast, Yusuke charges straight toward Toguro, then suddenly sidesteps and fires a full-powered spirit gun point blank into Toguro's face. Even then, Toguro isn't hurt. It turns out the elder Toguro transformed from a sword into a shield, blocking the attack completely. Toguro counters by smashing Yusuke with a punch and knocking him to the ground. He then rushes back to Kuwabara, attacks him again, and returns to Yusuke, knocking him down once more. Both fighters are completely overwhelmed. Tarukane watches in excitement as Yusuke and Kuwabara get tossed around, while Sakio remains calm and unaffected by the situation. Back in the spirit world, Koenma worries that Yusuke and Kuwabara won't survive this fight. Kurama, who knows the Toguro brothers' reputation, agrees that Yusuke simply isn't ready to face someone this powerful. Koenma wonders why Hiei still hasn't appeared. Kurama decides to leave, and Koenma assumes he's heading off to help Yusuke and the others, though he doubts Kurama will make it in time. At that same moment, Hiei is already inside the mansion. Meanwhile, Yusuke and Kuwabara continue getting beaten down as Tarukane torments Yukina, telling her that these humans are about to die because of her, just like the last one. Through his heightened spirit awareness, Kuwabara suddenly begins seeing Yukina's memories, the torture she endured as Tarukane forced her to cry for profit, and the loss of the human who once tried to rescue her. Seeing this fills Kuwabara with resolve, and his spirit energy surges. Toguro notices the sudden increase in Kuwabara's power as he tosses Yusuke aside. Kuwabara, however, is no longer focused on Toguro. His attention turns to Tarukane, the man responsible for Yukina's suffering. Kuwabara summons his spirit sword and charges straight at Tarukane, but Toguro steps in, blocks every attack, and punches Kuwabara back once again. Yusuke notices what's happening, and Kuwabara quickly comes up with a plan, calling out to Yusuke for help. Once more, Kuwabara charges forward with his spirit sword, and Toguro prepares to finish him off. At that exact moment, Yusuke fires his spirit gun directly into Kuwabara. The force of the blast doubles Kuwabara's speed, catching Toguro completely off guard. Unable to react in time, Toguro is stabbed clean through the gut by Kuwabara's spirit sword. Acknowledging how clever Yusuke and Kuwabara's strategy was, Toguro collapses and is defeated. Tarukane is stunned by the sudden reversal, while Sakio is thrilled, knowing Tarukane is about to lose everything. The members of the Black Club immediately turn on Tarukane, abandoning him completely. Desperate, Tarukane tries to escape and take Yukina with him so he can hold on to at least some of his wealth. But before he can get far, Hiei bursts into the room. He takes out Tarukane's guards without hesitation and moves to punish Tarukane for everything he's done to Yukina. Tarukane begs for his life, but Hiei begins beating him mercilessly. Just as Hiei is about to deliver the final blow, Yukina stops him. She says she's already seen too much violence and wants it to end. Because Hiei cares for her so much, he listens and stops. However, Yukina doesn't recognize him and asks who he is. Hiei decides it isn't the right time to reveal the truth and tells her he's simply part of the team that came to rescue her. Yukina runs off to meet her rescuers, and Kurama arrives at the mansion shortly after, questioning why Hiei didn't tell her who he really is. Hiei responds that he only wants his sister to be happy. When Yukina meets the others, she immediately goes to Kuwabara and uses her powers to heal his injuries. She apologizes to him for having to fight because of her, but Kuwabara tells her that he's the one who should be sorry for not saving her sooner. He worries that what she's been through might make her hate humans, but Yukina reassures him that she actually likes humans very much. The moment leaves them both overwhelmed with emotion as the mission comes to an end.